I am your host Jack, and welcome to RiddleStop. This is a channel for people who love a great mystery, told exactly as it deserves to be told. Classic cases, brilliant minds, stories that stay with you. You're in the right place. The wrong man confessed. A Nero Wolfe story. Chapter 1. The sister believes him. She arrived on a Thursday morning at 10:40, which was 20 minutes before Wolfe came down from the plant rooms, and 40 minutes before I had expected anyone, because I had not expected anyone. I was at my desk doing the expense accounting for the Hendricks matter, a straightforward insurance case that had taken 4 days and produced a result satisfactory to the client and to the fee structure, when the bell rang and Fritz went to the door and came back to the office doorway with the expression he reserves for visitors who are not appointments and are not obviously dangerous and fall therefore into the category of things he would prefer I handle. "A Miss Cohen," he said. "She says it is about her brother." I knew the name. I had read the papers that week as I read them every week, and the confession of Daniel Cohen to the murder of Harlan Greer had been on page 3 of the Gazette on Monday and page 1 of the Times on Tuesday, and had been discussed on 2 occasions in the office by Wolfe, who had read both accounts with the focused attention he brings to cases that are not his, and said on the first occasion that the confession was interesting, and on the second occasion that the confession was wrong, and had not elaborated on either statement, which is his standard operating procedure when he is thinking about something he has not yet been paid to think about. "Send her in," I said. Margaret Cohen was 31, which I established later from the details she gave me. In the office that morning, she looked both younger and older than 31. Younger because she had the kind of face that worry makes younger rather than older, the face of someone whose features have not yet settled into the permanent arrangement that difficulty eventually imposes, and older because the worry itself was not new. She had been carrying it since Monday, which is 4 days, and 4 days of the specific worry of a sister who has watched her brother confess to murder is not a light 4 days. She was dressed carefully, not expensively, carefully, which is a different thing and tells you more. Dark coat, good shoes that had been resoled once, hair that had been arranged with attention and had partially escaped the arrangement on the walk over. She carried a purse that she held with both hands in her lap when she sat down, which is the posture of a woman who has brought money she is not sure will be enough, and is hoping the posture does not advertise this. She looked at Cato first. He was in his position beside the desk, coal black, 70 pounds, completely still, watching her with the patient authority of something that has decided she is not a threat and has filed this conclusion and moved on to simply existing in the room. She looked at him for a moment, and then at me, and then at the rest of the office. Then Juno came in from the hall and went directly to the red leather chair where Margaret Cohen was sitting and lay down beside it, which is not something Juno does with every visitor, and which Margaret Cohen received without comment, reaching down once to briefly touch Juno's head with the automatic gesture of a woman who is used to animals and finds their presence steadying rather than alarming. I noted this, filed it, went back to Margaret Cohen's face. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe." "He's with his orchids until 11, I said. "You can tell me and I'll tell him, or you can wait 20 minutes and tell him yourself." She looked at her purse. "I'll wait," she said. So we waited. I went back to the expense accounting, and she sat in the red leather chair with Juno beside her, and looked at the office, the bookshelves, the globe, the paintings, the desk, the chair that was empty and waiting, with the attention of a woman who is in a place she has heard about, and is finding that it is exactly what she was told, and is not sure whether that is reassuring or not. At 11:02 Wolfe's step came down the hall, and he appeared in the doorway, and looked at Margaret Cohen, and then at Juno beside her chair, which he registered with the slight pause of a man noting a specific piece of information, and went to his chair and lowered himself into it, and looked at her. "Miss Cohen," he said. "Mr. Wolfe." She straightened slightly. "My brother confessed to killing Harlan Greer on Monday morning. He did not do it. I need you to prove that." Wolfe looked at her for a moment. "Why do you believe he did not do it?" "Because I know my brother," she said. "That is not evidence," Wolfe said. "It is conviction. The two are related but not identical. Tell me the difference between what you know and what you feel." She was quiet for a moment. I had my notebook out and I was watching her decide, which is one of the more useful things to watch a person do in a first interview, because the decision itself tells you something. "Daniel has never lied to me," she said, "in 31 years, not about anything that mattered." She paused. "He is lying now. I can hear it in how he sounds on the telephone, and I can see it in how he sits when I visit, and I know it the way you know the things about the people you grew up with that you cannot put into words because the knowledge is older than words." She looked at Wolfe directly. "He did not kill Harlan Greer. He said he did. Those are two different things, and I am asking you to find out what is between them. Wolfe looked at her for a long moment. Whatever calculation he was running was not visible on his face, but it was running. I know the quality of his stillness when he is thinking, and this was that quality. 3 questions, he said. Yes. Did your brother tell you he was innocent? No, she said. He told me he did it. He has told me 3 times, each time I asked. Each time I did not believe him. Did he give you any reason for the confession beyond the facts of the murder itself? No. He described what happened. He said he and Mr. Greer argued, that Mr. Greer struck him, that he picked up the letter opener from the desk in the struggle. She paused. He described it the same way each time, exactly the same way, as though he had memorized it. I wrote that down. A confession delivered identically on 3 separate occasions is not a confession, it is a performance of a confession. People who are telling the truth vary. People who have learned a version are consistent. 3rd question, Wolfe said. Is there someone in your brother's life whose situation would be significantly damaged by a connection to Harlan Greer, or to this case? Margaret Cohen was very still for a moment. Then she said, there is a woman. A woman he has been close to for 2 years. I don't know her well. He kept that part of his life separate. She paused. He is very protective of her. I always thought it was because I don't know her situation precisely. But he never introduced me, and he mentioned her rarely, and when he did it was always with that specific kind of carefulness that means someone is fragile in a way you have decided to protect. Wolfe nodded once. He looked at me. The fee, he said, which is his way of telling me to handle the financial portion, which I did. Margaret Cohen had $70. I took 35 and told her we would bill the remainder against results, which is not our standard practice, and which Wolfe did not contradict, which meant he had already decided to take the case on whatever terms presented themselves. She opened her purse and counted out $35 in bills that had been folded together in advance, which meant she had anticipated the amount or close to it, and had prepared accordingly. I took the money and gave her a receipt. Miss Cohen, Wolfe said, I want you to understand what I am undertaking. Your brother has confessed in detail to a murder. The police are satisfied. The district attorney is satisfied. I am going to prove the confession false, which means I am going to work against the momentum of an accepted conclusion with a fixed time limit. Your brother's arraignment. He paused. How many days? 10, she said. The arraignment is set for the 17th. 10 days, Wolfe said. It is enough if it is enough. I will be in contact through Mr. Goodwin. He picked up his book, which was on the desk where he had left it the previous evening. One thing more. The woman your brother is protective of. Her name, if you know it. Clare, Margaret said. Clare Voss. I don't know more than that. The name Voss landed in the room and sat there. I wrote it in my notebook and did not look up because if I looked up, Wolfe would see that I had registered something, and he prefers to register things himself before I confirm them. Voss. The same name, or close enough, as the silent partner Saul would eventually surface in Chapter 6, though I did not know that yet. What I knew at 10 minutes past 11 on a Thursday morning was that Margaret Cohen's brother had confessed to murder to protect a woman named Voss, and that somewhere in the connective tissue between that name and Harlan Greer's publishing house was the shape of what had actually happened on a Tuesday evening when a man with a whiskey glass and a letter opener had ended up dead. Wolfe opened his book. Margaret Cohen stood, gathered her coat, looked at Juno, who was still beside the chair. Thank you, she said. To Juno, I think, as much as to either of us. She went out. Fritz showed her to the door. I heard it close. I looked at Wolfe. Voss, I said. Yes, Wolfe said, without looking up. Find out everything about Harlan Greer today. Use the morning. He turned a page. And Archie. Yes. 10 days is not 11 days. Begin now. I began. Chapter 2. The House on Madison Avenue. Greer and Associates occupied the 4th and 5th floors of a building on Madison Avenue between 44th and 45th that had the particular quality of a building that knows it is on Madison Avenue and has decided this is sufficient reason to maintain itself without ostentation. The lobby was marble and understated. The elevator was slow and quiet. The 4th floor reception area, when I arrived at 2 in the afternoon with a business card, identifying me as a freelance journalist working on a piece about the American publishing industry, had the warm literary atmosphere of an institution that takes books seriously and wants you to know it the moment you step off the elevator. Bookshelves along 2 walls, naturally. Not decorative. Reading copies, galleys, manuscripts in manila envelopes, stacked with the organized disorder of a working editorial office. Framed book covers on the remaining wall. 40 years of Greer and Associates titles arranged chronologically. The older ones faded at the edges, the recent ones bright and confident. A receptionist named Helen, who was 25 and efficient, and who looked at my card with the careful attention of a young woman who has been trained to be friendly and screened to be discerning. I told her I was doing a retrospective piece on Greer and Associates following Mr. Greer's death, a tribute, I said, to 40 years of literary contribution. She softened appropriately and said she would see whether Mr. Ellery was available, and went away, and I stood in the reception area and looked at the book covers on the wall and thought about a publishing house that was more profitable than its literary reputation accounted for. That detail had come from Lon Cohen, whom I had called at 9 that morning from the brownstone before Wolfe came down from the plant rooms. Lon had given me 20 minutes and the following. Greer and Associates had been founded in 1912 by Harlan Greer's father, inherited by Harlan in 1931, and had published serious literary fiction for 40 years with the kind of consistent quality that wins awards without necessarily selling large numbers. The financial profile, however, did not match the sales profile. The house was profitable in a way that serious literary publishers are not typically profitable, and had been for at least 15 years, and the discrepancy had been noted once in a trade publication and not followed up, which Lon said was itself interesting. I agreed it was interesting and wrote it in my notebook and went to Madison Avenue. Thomas Ellery kept me waiting 11 minutes, which is the waiting time of a man who wants to establish that he is busy without being rude, and came out to reception with the handshake and the manner of a senior editor who has been representing his house to journalists for 20 years and has the performance down to a science. He was 60, lean, with the slightly compressed quality of a man who reads too much and sits too long, and has made peace with both. Good suit, good shoes, the kind of eyeglasses that announce intellectual seriousness without announcing expense. He looked at my card with the attention of a man who reads everything and led me back through the editorial offices to his own, which was at the end of the hall and overlooked Madison Avenue, and was lined floor to ceiling with the books he had edited over 20 years, which is a wall that tells you more about a man than most walls do. He sat behind his desk, and I sat across from it, and he looked at me with the bright, focused attention of a man who is performing openness, and doing it well enough that you have to look carefully to see the performance. A tribute piece, he said. Harlan would have been pleased. He cared very much about the house's reputation. 40 years is a significant legacy, I said. It is. His father built something genuine, and Harlan maintained it. That's harder than it sounds. Maintaining something genuine in this business over 4 decades takes a specific kind of commitment. What kind? I said. He smiled. The kind that says no to the wrong projects regardless of what they pay, he said. Harlan was very good at saying no, and yes, when something deserved it. He settled back in his chair. We published Ruth Kane's first novel in 1941. We've published every one of her books since. That's the kind of yes that defines a house. I wrote Ruth Kane's name in my notebook as though I was writing it for the first time. She must be devastated by Mr. Greer's death, I said. Something moved through Ellery's expression. Very brief, very controlled. The specific movement of a man filing a piece of information about how much I know. She is, he said. We all are. His assistant has confessed, I said, keeping my tone journalistic, factual, slightly detached. Daniel Cohen. Did you know him well? Reasonably well. He was efficient, discreet, loyal. Harlan relied on him considerably. He paused. I was surprised by the confession, though I suppose one is always surprised by these things. Were there tensions between them that you observed? I said. Between Cohen and Mr. Greer? Ellery looked at me for a moment with the expression of a man deciding whether the question is journalistic or something else. He decided journalistic. All assistants have tensions with their employers, he said. It's the nature of the relationship. I observed nothing that suggested anything beyond the normal friction of a demanding man, and the person who manages his demands. We talked for another 20 minutes about the house's history, about Greer's editorial philosophy, about the authors who had defined the list. Ellery was excellent. Everything he said was true and carefully selected and arranged in an order that produced a specific picture without being dishonest about any individual element. It was the performance of a man who has decided what can be known and what cannot, and has organized his account accordingly. At one point I asked to use the facilities and he directed me down the hall, and on the way back I took 45 extra seconds to look through the open door of Greer's private office, which was adjacent to Ellery's and which I had clocked on the way in. The office had been cleaned, professionally. Recently, the kind of cleaning that follows a police examination and precedes the return of normal life. The desk was cleared, the bookshelves were intact, the leather chair behind the desk was empty. But the filing cabinet in the corner, a 4-drawer lateral cabinet in dark wood that matched the desk, had a specific quality that I noted and filed. The top drawer was closed. The second drawer was closed. The third drawer was open approximately 1 inch, which is the amount a drawer opens when it has been searched and the searcher has pushed it most of the way closed and not bothered with the last inch. The fourth drawer was closed. Someone had been in that cabinet after the police and before this afternoon. I went back to Ellery's office and thanked him for his time and gave him the name of the publication I was supposedly writing for and told him I would be in touch, and went back down in the slow elevator and out onto Madison Avenue. I found the building superintendent in the basement. His name was Roy, and he had been in the building for 12 years and had the specific detailed knowledge of a man who knows every person who comes and goes in a building he maintains and has opinions about all of them. I gave him $5, which in 1950s New York buys you a great deal of opinion, and asked him about the comings and goings at Greer and Associates in the week since the murder. Roy had opinions. The police had been there Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. The staff had come and gone in their normal patterns after that. Ellery arriving at 8:30, the editorial staff at 9, the receptionist at 8:50, the various authors and agents who moved through the offices in the normal rhythms of a publishing house. But on Wednesday evening, the day after the murder, the day after Cohen's confession, someone had come to the 4th floor at 7:15 after the staff had left, and stayed for 40 minutes. Roy had seen him in the elevator, a man of 50 or so, well-dressed, with the particular quality of someone who is accustomed to being in a building without being noticed, and has the manner that produces that result. "Did he sign in?" I asked. Roy looked at the $5 in a way that suggested the question deserved consideration. I gave him another $2. "He had a key," Roy said, "to the floor. He didn't need to sign in. A key to the floor, not a key to the building. The building was open until 8, but a key to the 4th floor, which had a secondary lock that the building management had installed at Greer's request some years ago." "Had you seen him before?" I said. "Couple times," Roy said. "Always after hours, always with the key." He thought about it. "Last time before Wednesday was maybe 2 months ago." I thanked Roy and went back out to Madison Avenue and stood on the sidewalk for a moment in the cold November afternoon and thought about a man with a private key who came to a dead man's office the day after the murder and spent 40 minutes in it and left. A man with a key to a floor is either an owner, a partner, or someone an owner or partner has decided deserves that level of access. Greer and Associates had one named partner, which was Greer himself. The silent partner that Lon had hinted at, and that I had not yet put a face to, had apparently a key. I went back to the brownstone and told Wolfe. He was at his desk with his second beer of the pre-dinner session, and the 4 animals in their positions, Cato beside the desk, Ajax on his circuit, Juno at the hallway intersection. Zora was in her corner. She looked at me when I came in with the specific quality of attention that means she has registered my return and filed it, and returned to whatever she was thinking, which I have come to believe is more than nothing. Wolfe listened to the full account. Ellery, the filing cabinet, Roy the superintendent, the man with the key, without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "The filing cabinet," he said. "Third drawer," I said. 1 inch open. Recent. "What would a lateral filing cabinet in Harlan Greer's private office contain?" he said. It was not a question exactly. It was Wolfe thinking aloud in the form of a question, which he does when he wants me to follow the reasoning, rather than just receive the conclusion. "Correspondence," I said. "Contracts, manuscripts under consideration, personal files." I paused. Whatever he kept that was not on the desk, and not in the general editorial files. "And a man with a private key," Wolfe said, "who came the day after the murder, and spent 40 minutes in that office, was looking for something in those files that he needed before anyone else found it. He looked at his beer. He did not find it. Otherwise he would not have closed the drawer imperfectly. A man who has found what he came for does not rush. A man who has not found it does. Whatever he was looking for is still in that cabinet," I said. "Or was never in that cabinet," Wolfe said. "And his search was the act of a man eliminating possibilities rather than pursuing certainties." He picked up his book. "Tomorrow you will find the man with the key. Start with Lon Cohen, and tomorrow evening I want the full text of Cohen's confession. Get it from wherever you get things you are not supposed to have." "I know a man at the DA's office," I said. "Then know him more specifically tomorrow," Wolfe said, and opened to his page. I went to my desk and looked at my notes and thought about 10 days becoming 9, and the specific quality of Ellery's expression when I mentioned Ruth Kane's name, the very brief, very controlled movement of a man filing a piece of information about how much I know. He had not expected me to know Ruth Kane's name, or rather, He had expected me to know it in the journalistic sense, as an author on the Greer list, a 40-year relationship, a name worth mentioning in a tribute piece. He had not expected me to know it in whatever other sense it deserved to be known, and his expression for approximately 1 second had told me that there was another sense. I wrote Ruth Kane, cancelled appointment, find out in my notebook, and went to ask Fritz what was for dinner. Fritz said veal, which it was, and it was excellent, and Wolfe ate with the attention the veal deserved, and said nothing about the case for the entire meal, which meant he was thinking about it continuously. After dinner I called my contact at the DA's office, a man named Briggs, who owed me a favor from a matter I will not detail, and told him what I needed and when I needed it. He was quiet for a moment, and then said he would see what he could do, which in Briggs's vocabulary means he will do it. I went to bed at 10:30 with 9 days on the clock. In the hall outside my room, Ajax was on his late circuit. I heard him pass, steady and methodical, checking the perimeter of the brownstone the way he has checked it every night since the mountain case. Not anxious, not restless, just present, doing what he does because it is what he does, and because the doing of it is sufficient reason. I fell asleep thinking about a filing cabinet with a third drawer, 1 inch open, and a man with a key who had not found what he came for, and was presumably still looking. Chapter 3. The confession has 3 problems. Briggs delivered at 8:15 Friday morning. He called the brownstone and I took it at my desk with my coffee and my notebook, and he read me the confession in full, which took 14 minutes, and I wrote every word of it in my notebook in the compressed shorthand I developed in my first year working for Wolfe, and have refined over 11 years to the point where I can transcribe a spoken account at close to full speed without losing material. When Briggs finished, I thanked him and told him the favor was settled, and hung up and read back through what I had written. The confession of Daniel Cohen ran to 6 pages in its official form and covered the following ground: that he had been Harlan Greer's personal assistant for 6 years, that the relationship had been professional and satisfactory for the first 4 of those years, and had deteriorated in the final 2, that the specific cause of the deterioration was a disagreement about the handling of a particular manuscript submission that Cohen had recommended, and Greer had rejected in terms that Cohen considered personally insulting, that this disagreement had produced a series of subsequent frictions, and that on the evening of Tuesday the 6th of November, Cohen had remained in the office after the other staff departed to discuss the situation directly with Greer, that the discussion had become an argument, that Greer had struck him across the face with an open hand, and that Cohen had picked up the letter opener from the desk in the struggle that followed, and used it. The confession described the position of the body, the position of the whiskey glass, the specific location of the letter opener on the desk before Cohen picked it up, the angle of entry, the time approximately 7:15 in the evening, Cohen said, though he had not checked his watch. It described Cohen leaving the building through the fire stairs rather than the elevator, exiting onto the side street, walking to the Lexington Avenue subway, and going home to his apartment in Astoria, where he had spent the night and the following morning, before presenting himself at the precinct at 9 o'clock. I read it through twice. Then I poured a second coffee and read it a third time with a pencil in my hand, marking 3 places. Then I went upstairs to the plant rooms. Wolfe was at the bench in the warm room, with a phalaenopsis that required his attention, and was getting it in full. Theodore was at the far end, doing something with potting medium. I stood in the doorway until Wolfe registered my presence, which takes as long as it takes, and cannot be hurried. He looked up. "The confession," I said. "I have it." "Read it," he said. I read it. All of it from the beginning, at the pace he prefers, not rushed, not dramatic, just the words in the order they came. He listened with his hands occupied with the phalaenopsis and his attention entirely on what I was saying, which is a quality of his that I have never fully gotten used to, the ability to do 2 things simultaneously without diminishing either. When I finished, he was quiet for 30 seconds. Then he said, 3 problems. I marked 3. I said, "I want to know if they're the same 3. Read me your 3. I looked at my notebook. First, the position of the letter opener. Cohen says it was on the left side of the desk, near the front edge, but the police report, which Briggs also read me, the public version, describes the desk as having been partially cleared before the struggle, with items displaced to the right side. If there was a struggle of the kind Cohen describes, the letter opener would have been displaced with everything else. A letter opener on the left front edge of a desk that has been struggled over is a letter opener that was placed there after the struggle, not one that was picked up in the middle of it." Wolfe nodded once, which with Wolfe means continue. Second, the time. Cohen says approximately 7:15 and says he did not check his watch, but 2 witnesses in the building, the cleaning crew, who Briggs mentioned were interviewed, We're on the 5th floor from 7 o'clock until 7:50 and heard nothing. The 5th floor is directly above Greer's office. An argument violent enough to end in a stabbing produces noise. 7:15, with the cleaning crew directly above, would have produced audible noise. It did not, meaning the time is wrong, Wolfe said. The death occurred either before 7, when the cleaning crew arrived, or after 7:50, when they left. Or the struggle was not violent in the way Cohen describes, I said. Or there was no struggle at all and the body positioning was arranged after the fact. Continue, Wolfe said. Third is the whiskey glass, I said. Cohen describes Greer as drinking whiskey when he arrived. The glass was on the desk, to the right of the blotter, half empty. Cohen describes the argument starting while Greer was still holding the glass, and Greer setting it down when he stood to strike him. I paused. The police report says the glass was found on the left side of the desk, not the right, and it was empty, not half empty. Wolfe set down the phalaenopsis. He looked at me with the expression he gets when something has been confirmed to his satisfaction. You have the same 3 problems I have, he said. State the conclusion. The confession describes a scene that Cohen was told about. I said, not a scene he participated in. Whoever told him got 3 details wrong: the letter opener position, the time, the whiskey glass. Either they were working from memory under stress, or they described the scene before it was arranged to its final configuration, or both. I paused. Cohen memorized what he was told. He delivered it consistently because memorized accounts are consistent, but he could not correct the 3 wrong details because he did not know they were wrong. He wasn't there. He was not there, Wolfe agreed. Which means he was given the account by someone who was there, someone who either committed the murder or was present when it occurred, and chose for their own reasons not to report it. He picked up the phalaenopsis again, and that person is the someone he is protecting. Clare Voss, I said. Almost certainly, Wolfe said, but almost is not sufficient. Find her, today if possible. Do not approach her. Find her, establish her situation, and bring me what you find. He looked at the orchid, and the man with the key. Both today. That's a full day, I said. You have 9 of them, Wolfe said. Use this one completely. I used it completely. Lon Cohen gave me 40 minutes at the Gazette over coffee at 9:30, which is longer than he usually gives anyone, and reflects the length of our professional relationship and the regularity with which I give him something worth printing when the cases resolve. I told him I needed 2 things, the man with the key to Greer's floor, and anything the Gazette had on a woman named Clare Voss. Lon looked at his coffee, then at me. This is the Greer case, he said. The Gazette has been calling it closed since Tuesday, I said. The Gazette reported the confession, he said. Reporting a confession is not calling a case closed. Noted, I said. The man with the key. Lon was quiet for a moment, with the specific quality of a reporter deciding how much of what he knows to give a source who will eventually give him something better in return. Greer had a silent partner, he said. Has been an open secret in the publishing world for 15 years. Nobody's ever put a name to it in print because there was never a reason to, and because the man in question is the kind of man who creates reasons not to. He paused. His name is Gerald Voss. I kept my face neutral. Voss, I said. Gerald Voss, real estate primarily, but with interests in several media properties over the years. He and Greer went back to the 30s. The partnership in the publishing house was never public, no paperwork, no listing, just a financial arrangement that kept Greer and Associates solvent through the periods when literary fiction alone would not have managed it. He looked at me. You want to know what kept it solvent? I want to know what kept it solvent, I said. The manuscript trade, Lon said. Not acquisitions, the private market. Letters, diaries, unpublished manuscripts, personal documents belonging to notable figures. Some of it legitimate, estates selling archives, that kind of thing. Some of it considerably less so. He paused. There have been rumors for years about documents obtained without the knowledge or consent of their owners. Nothing proven, nothing brought. The people involved have resources that make bringing things difficult. I thought about Ruth Kane, who had a cancelled appointment and a specific grievance she had been managing for 2 years. I thought about Clare Voss. I thought about Gerald Voss and his key to the 4th floor and his 40 minutes in the filing cabinet the day after the murder. The other thing, I said. Clare Voss. Lon looked at his coffee again. Gerald Voss's daughter, he said. 32, lives on the west side, Riverside Drive. She's a musician, piano, serious level, has performed at Carnegie Hall twice in the last 3 years. He paused. She had a connection to Greer and Associates through her father's partnership. She also had there was a situation, about 2 years ago, involving some personal correspondence that surfaced in the manuscript market, letters she had written, private letters. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has decided he has said enough for now. It was managed, quietly, at considerable cost to Gerald Voss. Managed how? I said. The letters were recovered, Lon said, or most of them were. The question of who had them and how they were obtained was not pursued publicly. He paused. Gerald Voss is the kind of man who manages things rather than pursuing them publicly. I thanked Lon and went back to the car and sat for a moment. Clare Voss, a pianist. Private letters that had surfaced in the manuscript market 2 years ago. Letters obtained from her without her consent and sold through the secondary operation that Greer and Associates ran behind its literary reputation. Her own father's silent partner had sold his daughter's private correspondence, and Daniel Cohen had been Greer's assistant for 6 years, had known about the secondary operation, had known almost certainly about what had been done to Clare Voss, had been close to her for 2 years, which meant he had met her at approximately the time the letters situation was being managed, had been protective of her in the specific way of a man who knows what someone has been through and has decided he will not let it happen again. I drove to Riverside Drive. The building was pre-war, solid, with a doorman who had the practiced manner of someone who screens visitors as a professional matter and does it well. I gave him my card and said I was calling on Miss Voss in connection with a legal matter relating to Greer and Associates and asked him to ring up. He rang up. There was a pause. Then he handed me the house phone. Miss Voss. I said, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. I'm not here to cause you difficulty. I'm here because Daniel Cohen's sister hired us to prove his confession false, and I believe you can help me do that. The silence on the other end lasted long enough that I thought she had put the phone down. Then she said, come up. Her voice was low and very controlled in the way of someone who has been controlling it for some time and has become skilled at it. 4th floor, apartment D. The apartment was the apartment of a serious musician who is also the daughter of a wealthy man, not decorated with wealth but not without it either. The particular combination of genuine aesthetic taste and the financial ease that allows taste to be expressed without compromise. A Steinway grand occupied a third of the main room. Scores on the music stand, penciled annotations in the margins, bookshelves, photographs from performances. Through the window the Hudson in November, grey and wide. She was standing when I came in. 32, as Lon had said, with dark hair and the particular posture of a pianist, a specific quality of held stillness in the upper body that comes from years of training and never entirely leaves even when you are not at the instrument. She was pale in the way of someone who has not been sleeping and has been managing that fact through the sustained application of will. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has decided to do something and is not entirely certain it is the right decision and has decided to do it anyway because the alternative is worse. He didn't tell me he was going to do it, she said, before I had sat down, before I had opened my notebook. I want you to know that first. I found out Monday morning when I read the paper. What did you do when you found out? I said. She looked at the piano. I telephoned him. He told me it was true, that he had done it. She paused. I knew it wasn't true. How did you know? She was quiet for a long moment. The river outside the window was very grey and very still. Because I was there, she said. I had my notebook open. I did not write anything yet. Miss Voss, I said carefully, before you tell me anything further, I want you to understand that I work for Daniel Cohen's sister, not for the police and not for the DA's office, and that anything you tell me will be used to help Daniel Cohen and not to harm you. She looked at me directly. Her eyes were the eyes of a woman who has been through something and has come out the other side of it, changed in ways that do not show immediately. I know who Nero Wolfe is, she said. I know what he does. Danny told me about him once, said if anything ever went completely wrong, he would find a way to get to Wolfe. She paused. I didn't understand what he meant at the time. He meant this. I said, tell me what happened Tuesday evening. She told me. It took 25 minutes and I wrote all of it, and when she finished, I closed my notebook and looked at the grey river, and thought about Daniel Cohen sitting across from his sister 3 times, and delivering his memorized account of a scene he had been given by a woman who had been in that office, and had not wanted to tell him what she had done, but had because he had asked her directly and she had not been able to lie to him, and who had then watched him walk into the 17th precinct the following morning and give her account as his own. He never asked your permission, I said. No, she said. He told me after. He called me from a payphone near the precinct at 9:15. She paused. I told him to go back and retract it. He said it was done and he was not going to retract it. She looked at the piano. He said He said the thing that had been done to me 2 years ago had already cost me enough, and he was not going to let it cost me this too. The thing that had been done to her, her letters, sold through Greer's secondary operation, the private correspondence of a young woman obtained and marketed without her knowledge by the silent partner's own publisher. Your father's partner, I said. Greer sold your letters. She looked at me. My father didn't know, she said. When he found out, he managed it, as he manages things. He recovered most of the letters. He paid what needed to be paid. She paused. He did not tell me everything about how it was managed. I did not ask. But you knew enough, I said. I knew enough that when Harlan Greer telephoned me 6 weeks ago and told me he had retained certain items from my correspondence that had not been included in the original recovery and that he would appreciate a meeting to discuss terms, I knew what that meant. She looked at the river. I went to his office Tuesday evening to discuss terms, and the terms were not agreeable, I said. The terms, she said quietly, were not something I was willing to meet, and when I told him that and he told me what he intended to do with what he had retained, I picked up the letter opener from his desk, and I used it. She paused. I did not plan it. I want you to know that. I did not go there intending that. But he told me what he intended, and I looked at him and I thought about 2 years of I thought about everything it had cost, and I picked up the letter opener. The room was very still. After, she said, I straightened certain things. I moved the glass. I was not thinking clearly. I moved things, and then I left by the fire stairs and I walked for a long time, and then I went home. She paused, and the next morning Danny called me and asked me directly what had happened, and I told him, and then he was gone, and I was reading the newspaper. I looked at my notebook. The 3 problems with the confession assembled themselves in new order. The letter opener position, because she had moved it after, not knowing its original position. The time, because she had not been specific about it, and Cohen had guessed. The whiskey glass, because she had moved it and told Cohen where she moved it to, not where it had started. 3 wrong details given in good faith by a woman who had been trying to remember clearly in a state of considerable distress and had not managed perfect accuracy. 3 wrong details memorized by a man who had no way to know they were wrong. I closed my notebook. Miss Voss, I said, Nero Wolfe is going to need to speak with you. Not today, in the next few days. He will find a way to resolve this that does not require you to go to the police yourself. She looked at me with the expression I had seen on Margaret Coyne that morning. Not hope exactly, but the specific quality of a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just been told there may be a way to set it down. Can he do that, she said. He's done harder things, I said, which was true, and went back to the brownstone. Wolfe was at his desk when I came in at 6:15. I sat across from him and told him everything. Lon Cohen, Gerald Voss and his key, Clare Voss and her letters, and the Tuesday evening that had produced a dead publisher and a false confession, and 9 days on a clock that was still running. Wolfe listened without moving. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, longer than usual, the kind of quiet that means he has arrived at the full shape of the thing and is sitting with it before he begins to act on it. Cato was beside the desk, Juno at the intersection, Ajax on his circuit, Zora in her corner, watching Wolfe with the absolute attention she brings to his stillness when the stillness is of this particular kind. The father, Wolfe said finally, Gerald Voss. His partner sold his daughter's letters, I said. He managed the recovery. He has a key to the floor. He was in the filing cabinet the day after the murder. He was not looking for the letters, Wolfe said. The letters were managed 2 years ago. He was looking for whatever Greer retained 6 weeks ago, the items not included in the original recovery, the leverage Greer used to arrange Tuesday's meeting. He paused. If those items are still in the filing cabinet, Gerald Voss did not find them, which means they are still there. Or Greer hid them elsewhere, I said. Yes. Wolfe looked at Zora, who looked back. We need those items. Without them, Greer's secondary operation remains unproven, and Clare Voss's motive is unsubstantiated, and the resolution I am constructing has no foundation. He looked at me. Tomorrow, the filing cabinet. I can't just walk into a dead man's office and search his filing cabinet, I said. No, Wolfe said, but Thomas Ellery can. He reached for his beer. Call him tonight. Tell him Nero Wolfe would like to speak with him tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. He will come. What makes you sure? Because Thomas Ellery has been in that building for 20 years and knows precisely what Greer was doing and has been waiting for someone to ask him about it in a way that offers him a path out of the knowledge. Wolfe drank. He will come because I am offering that path. He does not know it yet. He will understand it when he arrives. I called Ellery. He came to the phone with the careful manner and agreed to the meeting with a speed that confirmed Wolfe's assessment. A man answering in 3 seconds has been waiting for the call. I hung up and looked at the clock. 8 days remaining. Fritz appeared in the doorway and said dinner was ready, and it was the lamb, and Wolfe rose from his chair with the deliberate energy of a man who has the shape of the solution in his hands and is satisfied enough with it to eat well. I followed him to the dining room, and Ajax, completing his circuit, fell in behind us, which he sometimes does in the evenings, not because he wants the food, he has his own, but because the movement of the household in a consistent direction is a thing he finds professionally satisfying. 8 days. The lamb was excellent. Wolfe ate with full attention and said nothing about the case, and everything was exactly as it should be in the brownstone at 8 o'clock on a Friday evening, with the clock running and the shape of the solution beginning to be visible, and the 4 animals in their positions, and Fritz in his kitchen, and the city outside going about its permanent indifferent business. Chapter 4. Ruth Kane cancelled her appointment. Thomas Ellery arrived at 10 o'clock Saturday morning with the punctuality of a man who has decided to do something and intends to do it before he changes his mind. Fritz showed him to the office. He came in and looked at the room, the desk, the bookshelves, the globe, the paintings, with the attention of a man who reads spaces the way he reads manuscripts, looking for the character underneath the presentation. Then he looked at Cato beside the desk and at Zora in her corner, and his expression did what most people's expressions do when they encounter Zora for the first time. It stopped, reassembled, and continued with a slight but permanent adjustment. He sat in the red leather chair and looked at Wolfe. "You know," he said. It was not a question. "I know a great deal," Wolfe said. "I suspect more. Tell me what you know and we will establish where the overlap is." Ellery looked at his hands. They were the hands of a man who has handled manuscripts for 40 years. Careful, precise, slightly ink-stained at the right index finger, in the habitual way of someone who edits with a pen rather than a pencil. He looked at them for a moment, as though they belonged to someone else, and he was considering them objectively. "I have worked for Greer and Associates for 20 years, he said. "In that time I have published serious literary fiction with genuine pride and genuine commitment. The house has a real legacy. That is not a construction, it is real." He paused. "It is also not the complete picture." "Tell me the incomplete portion," Wolfe said. "The secondary operation," Ellery said. He said it flatly, without decoration. "Harlan ran a private manuscript and document acquisition business alongside the publishing house. I became aware of it approximately 12 years ago. I did not discover it. It was shown to me, because Harlan decided at that point that my awareness was preferable to my ignorance." He paused. He was correct. Ignorant employees ask questions. Aware ones make accommodations. "What accommodations did you make?" Wolfe said. "I continued doing my job," Ellery said. "I published good books. I did not ask questions about the 4th floor's secondary filing system, or about the visitors who came after hours, or about the specific financial arrangements that kept the house profitable when the literary list alone would not have managed it." He paused. "I made the accommodation of a man who has built his professional life in a specific place and cannot afford to examine the foundation too carefully." "Did you know about specific instances of documents obtained without consent?" Wolfe said. Ellery looked at Zora. She looked back at him with the focused patience that she brings to people who are deciding something. He seemed to find this steadying rather than unnerving, which I noted as interesting. "The Voss matter," he said. 2 years ago. Clare Voss's personal correspondence. I knew about it afterward, not during. When Gerald Voss came in and the situation was managed, I understood what had happened." He paused. "And 6 weeks ago, I knew that Harlan had retained certain items from that correspondence that had not been included in the recovery. I knew because he told me. He had become less careful in the last year, more confident than the situation warranted. Confident that the operation was protected," Wolfe said. "Confident that Gerald Voss's involvement made it untouchable," Ellery said. "Gerald had too much to lose from exposure. Harlan believed that made him permanently compliant." He paused. "He was wrong about that." "Yes," Wolfe said. "He was." He looked at Ellery steadily. "Mr. Ellery, the items Greer retained from the Voss correspondence, where are they?" Ellery was quiet for a moment. "The 4th drawer of the lateral cabinet in his private office," he said. "Behind a hanging file labeled Correspondence 1941. There is a false back to the drawer, a panel that slides. The items are behind the panel." Wolfe looked at me. I was already writing. "How do you know this?" I said. "Because Harlan showed me 6 weeks ago," Ellery said. "The same day he told me about the retained items. He was proud of it. He considered himself very clever. He looked at his hands again. He was clever. He was also a man who had spent 40 years acquiring things that did not belong to him, and had begun to believe that acquisition was simply what he did, and that there were no limits on it. He paused. Clare Voss was not the first. She was simply the one where the father had sufficient resources to push back. Who were the others? Wolfe said. Wolfe said, I will give you names, Ellery said. All of them, everything I know, but I want something in return. State it, Wolfe said. The publishing house, Ellery said. The legitimate operation. The 40 years of real books and real authors and real literary work. I want it to survive this. I want the secondary operation exposed and the house's genuine legacy preserved. They are not the same thing, and they should not be treated as the same thing. He paused. I have spent 20 years building something real inside something corrupt. I am asking you to distinguish between the two. Wolfe looked at him for a long moment. I will do what the evidence permits, he said. I will not conflate what deserves to be conflated, and I will not separate what cannot be separated. That is the limit of my commitment, and it is an honest one. Ellery nodded. It was the nod of a man accepting terms that are not everything he wanted, and are more than he expected. The names, he said, and gave them. I wrote for 20 minutes. When he finished, Wolfe thanked him and told him to be available, and Ellery left with the particular quality of a man who has put down a weight he has been carrying for a long time, and is discovering that the absence of it is not the relief he anticipated, but something more complicated. I looked at the list of names in my notebook. One of them I recognized immediately, which is why Wolfe had asked for the list before he sent me to find Ruth Kane, because now I would find her knowing something I had not known when I sat across from Ellery yesterday afternoon. Ruth Kane was not in the Gazette morgue. She was in the Gazette itself, a brief item from 2 years ago, a mention in the books column of a new novel, a photograph from a literary event. But what I needed was not in the public record. What I needed was the private record of what Greer had done to her, and what she had done with it. I called Lon at 11, and asked him directly. Lon was quiet for a moment. Ruth Kane, he said. Her name is on a list, I said. I need to know her specific connection to Greer's secondary operation. Another pause, the pause of a man deciding. She's been publishing with Greer for 12 years, he said. Serious literary reputation, serious sales for that category. In 1951 she submitted a manuscript, a novel, personal, based on events in her own life from the 30s. Greer accepted it. During the editorial process, certain personal letters she had submitted as research reference material were retained, not returned with the other materials when the editorial process concluded. Retained and sold, I said. Retained and offered, Lon said, to a collector who had expressed interest in correspondence from that period. Ruth found out about it 8 months later through a source I won't identify. She went to Greer. He denied it. She could not prove it. She has been publishing with him since because she had no choice. She was under contract for 2 more books and breaking the contract would have been financially ruinous, and she has been managing a specific and well-justified fury for 2 years. The cancelled appointment, I said. Tuesday evening. She had a meeting with Greer at 7, Lon said. She called his office at noon and cancelled. She told the receptionist she was unwell. Was she unwell? She was at a dinner party in the West Village from 6:30 to 11, Lon said. I confirmed this because I was curious when I heard about it. Her host will verify it. A pause. She did not cancel because she was unwell. She cancelled for another reason and used illness as the excuse. What other reason? That, Lon said. I don't know, but I'd like to, if you find out. I thanked him and found Ruth Kane's address through the phone directory. She was listed, which told me she had nothing to hide or had long since decided that hiding things was not her method, and drove to her apartment on West 73rd Street. She buzzed me up without asking who I was, which told me she had been expecting someone. She was 50, as I had established, with the kind of face that has been handsome for a long time and has developed through the process of remaining handsome, a quality of authority that handsomeness alone does not produce. She was in her working clothes, wool trousers, a dark sweater, reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she looked at me with the direct attention of a novelist who has spent 30 years studying how people present themselves and has very little patience for the gap between the presentation and the reality. Nero Wolfe's man, she said. Archie Goodwin, I said. Come in. The apartment was a writer's apartment, organized chaos, books and papers, and the particular productive disorder of a working mind. A typewriter on the desk with a page half finished in it, newspapers stacked by the window, a coffee cup that had been refilled several times, judging by the rings on the saucer. She sat across from me without offering coffee, which I took as a signal that this was going to be direct. "You cancelled your appointment with Greer Tuesday evening." I said. "I did," she said. "Why?" She looked at me steadily. "Because I received a telephone call at 11:30 Tuesday morning that told me the meeting would not be necessary." I kept my face neutral. "Who called you?" "A man," she said. "He didn't give his name. He said the matter I intended to discuss with Greer that evening was going to be resolved and that my presence would not be required." She paused. "He said I should cancel the appointment and stay home and read a book. And you believed him?" "I believed the part about cancelling the appointment," she said. "I didn't stay home. I went to a dinner party. But I cancelled." She paused. The call had the quality of someone who knew exactly what the situation was and had decided to handle it. I have been waiting 2 years for someone to handle it. When the call came, I chose to believe it. "What was the matter you intended to discuss with Greer?" I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "My letters," she said. "I had obtained evidence, specific documented evidence, of what he had done with my correspondence, what he had sold, to whom, for how much. I was going to that meeting to give him the choice between returning everything he retained and returning it through the courts." She paused. "I was not going to let it continue. The call told you it wouldn't continue." I said. "Yes." She paused. "And then the next morning I read that Greer was dead, and his assistant had confessed, and I understood what the call had been." She looked at the typewriter. "Someone knew what was going to happen Tuesday evening and called me to keep me out of it. I thought about this. A call at 11:30 Tuesday morning, telling Ruth Kane her meeting would not be necessary, which meant someone knew at 11:30 Tuesday morning what was going to happen in Greer's office Tuesday evening, which was either extraordinary prescience or something else." "The voice," I said. "The man who called, age, accent, anything." "Older," she said. 60 or so, controlled, the voice of a man accustomed to giving instructions and having them followed." She paused. There was something in it, not quite an accent, but a quality, as though English was not the first language of his youth. I wrote this down and did not say anything for a moment. Gerald Voss. Gerald Voss had called Ruth Kane at 11:30 Tuesday morning to clear the field. He had known what was going to happen that evening because he had arranged it, not the murder. Clare had not planned the murder, but he had known Clare was going to that meeting. He had known what she intended and what Greer would say and what Clare was capable of, driven by 2 years of what had been done to her. He had called Ruth Kane to remove one witness from the vicinity. He had given Clare the space to act, and then when the action had produced its result, he had gone to the office the next morning with his key and spent 40 minutes in the filing cabinet looking for the retained correspondence, looking for the thing Greer had used against his daughter, intending to remove it before anyone else could find it. He had not found it because Greer had been cleverer than he knew, hiding it behind a false panel that Ellery had revealed to me this morning. And then Daniel Cohen had walked into the precinct and confessed, and Gerald Voss had been given an outcome he had not arranged but was not unhappy with. His daughter protected, the confessor not his concern, the matter managed in the way he always managed things. Except that Nero Wolfe had been retained. I thanked Ruth Kane and told her she might be contacted again, and drove back to the brownstone in the cold November afternoon with 7 days on the clock and more pieces than I had started the day with, and the particular satisfaction of a man who can see the shape of the picture, even if he has not yet assembled all of it. Wolfe was in the plant rooms. I went up. He listened. When I got to the telephone call, Ruth Kane, 11:30 Tuesday morning, a man with a controlled voice and the quality of someone for whom English was not the first language of his youth. Wolfe set down the orchid he was holding. He set it down with the care he always uses, and then he folded his hands and looked at Theodore and said, "Leave us, please, Theodore," which Theodore did with the practiced discretion of a man who has learned not to be present when certain conversations happen. When Theodore was gone, Wolfe looked at me. "Gerald Voss," he said. "Yes," I said. "He knew Clare was going to that meeting," Wolfe said. "He cleared the field. He did not arrange the death. He is not that kind of man, or he is that kind of man in a way that does not extend to murder, but he created the conditions, and when it happened he went to remove the evidence." I said, "And didn't find it." Wolfe looked at the orchids around us. "He is going to be the most difficult element of the resolution," he said. "He is Clare's father. He acted to protect her. He is also a man who spent 30 years in partnership with a man who sold his own daughter's letters and chose until it became personally urgent to manage rather than stop it." He paused. "He is neither innocent nor simply guilty, and the resolution must account for both things. And Clare," I said, "she killed Greer." "She did," Wolfe said. in circumstances that any reasonable person would understand and that the law will not excuse. He looked at me, which is why Daniel Cohen confessed, because he understood both things simultaneously, what she did and what it would cost her, and chose the cost himself. He was quiet for a moment. I am going to need to find a resolution that the law can accept and that does not destroy two people who have already been destroyed enough. Can you? I said. Wolfe looked at the orchids for a long moment. I don't know, he said, which in 11 years he has said to me exactly twice, and both times he has been wrong, and I was counting on being wrong again. He went back to the phalaenopsis. I went downstairs. Juno was at her intersection. Cato was beside the desk. Ajax was at the door. Zora was in her corner, and she looked at me when I came into the office with the specific quality of attention she uses when she is registering something that matters. I sat at my desk and looked at the notes from the day, and thought about Gerald Voss and Ruth Kane and Clare at the piano on Riverside Drive, and Daniel Cohen in the precinct at 9 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, delivering someone else's account of something he had not done. 7 days. Wolfe would find a way. He always finds a way. But this time the way was going to cost something, and I was not yet sure what or whose. Fritz called dinner at 7:30. It was the chicken, roasted, and it was magnificent, and Wolfe ate every bit of it with the attention it deserved, and did not speak about the case once. The brownstone settled into its evening rhythms. 7 days. The clock ran. Chapter 5. Daniel Cohen comes to the brownstone. I called Margaret Cohen at 8 Sunday morning. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she had been awake for some time, and had been waiting for something without knowing what. I told her that Nero Wolfe needed to speak with her brother, and that the meeting should happen today if it could be arranged, and that Daniel should come to the brownstone at 2 in the afternoon, and should tell no one he was coming, and should arrive alone. She was quiet for a moment. He'll resist, she said. Tell him Wolfe has information about the case that Daniel needs to hear, I said. Don't tell him what the information is, because you don't know what it is. Tell him it's important and that coming is in his interest. Is it? She said. In his interest? Yes, I said, though he won't think so at first. She said she would try and call back at 9:15 to say Daniel would be there at 2. Her voice had the quality of a woman who has just had a difficult conversation and has prevailed in it and is not entirely sure. Prevailing was the right outcome. I told Wolfe. He was at his desk with the morning mail and his first beer of the day, which he takes at 11, and which Fritz produces with the regularity of a natural phenomenon. He received the news that Daniel Cohen would arrive at 2 with a nod that meant good and went back to the mail. I spent the morning on the telephone. Sol Panzer had been working since Friday on Gerald Voss, his financial history, his connections, the specific structure of his partnership with Greer, and what it had produced over 30 years. Sol called at 10 with a preliminary report that confirmed and extended what Lon Cohen had given me, and added 3 things I had not known. The first was that Gerald Voss had been making payments to Greer for 18 months, not the other direction, not a partner receiving profits, but Voss paying Greer, regular, substantial, the financial structure of a man being managed rather than a partner being compensated. Greer had apparently extended the secondary operation into territory that made Voss uncomfortable and had used the partnership's exposure as leverage to ensure Voss's continued compliance. Greer had been blackmailing his own partner. The second thing Saul had found was that Gerald Voss had retained a private investigator 8 months ago, a legitimate firm, not one of ours, whose specific brief, as best Saul could establish, had been to document Greer's secondary operation in sufficient detail to make it actionable. Voss had been building a case against his own partner, slowly, carefully, in the way he managed everything. The third thing was the most interesting. 6 weeks ago, the same week Greer had contacted Clare Voss about the retained correspondence, Gerald Voss had terminated the private investigator's contract. He had stopped building his case. He had apparently decided on a different approach. I wrote all of this in my notebook and went to tell Wolfe, who listened and then was quiet for a long time. He knew 6 weeks ago, Wolfe said, when Greer contacted Clare. He found out Greer had gone after his daughter a second time, and he stopped the legal approach and decided on something more direct. The Tuesday morning call to Ruth Kane, I said. He cleared the field, Wolfe said. He knew Clare was going to that meeting. He understood what Greer would say to her and what Clare was capable of in response. He removed the one witness who might have been present. He paused. He did not arrange a murder. He arranged an absence. The distinction matters legally and does not matter morally. He let his daughter walk into a situation he knew might produce exactly what it produced. I said. Yes, Wolfe said, and he has been living with that since Tuesday evening. He looked at the window. A man who can live with that is a specific kind of man. Gerald Voss has been a specific kind of man for 60 years. It should not surprise us. He picked up his beer. 2 o'clock, be ready. Daniel Cohen arrived at 1:58. He came alone as instructed in a dark coat that was not quite warm enough for November, and the expression of a man who has made a decision and is maintaining it through the sustained application of will and is finding the application more tiring than he anticipated. He was 34, as established, with a broad, ordinarily open face that was currently doing everything it could to be closed. Juno met him at the door. She came from her intersection when Fritz opened it and went directly to Daniel Cohen and stood before him and looked at him with the focused reading attention she brings to people she is assessing. And Cohen looked back at her with the expression of a man who has arrived prepared for a difficult conversation and has encountered, as his first obstacle, a Doberman who is looking at him with more intelligence than he expected. He reached down and let her smell his hand. She did, and then stepped aside, which I noted. Juno stepping aside means she has decided something is not a threat. It does not mean she has decided everything about the person is straightforward. It means the threat assessment is complete, and the other assessments are ongoing. Fritz showed him to the office. He came in and stopped. He had not been warned about Zora, and I had not warned him deliberately because Wolfe wanted the first moments in the room unmanaged, the visitor's responses to the space authentic rather than prepared. He looked at Kauto beside the desk, which most people look at first because Kauto is the most immediately present. Then he looked at Wolfe. Then his eyes went to the corner to the right of the desk and found Zora. He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back at him. Something in his face shifted. Not fear, not surprise exactly, but the specific adjustment of a man encountering something that does not fit his prepared framework and deciding in real time how to incorporate it. He incorporated it with more composure than most people manage, which told me something about him that the confession had not. He sat in the red leather chair and looked at Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "my sister said you had information." "I have a great deal of information," Wolfe said. "Before I share it, I want to ask you some questions. You are not obligated to answer them. You are not under oath. You are in a private office, and this conversation is confidential." He paused. "Do you understand that?" "Yes," Cohen said. "Good. How long have you known Clare Voss?" The name landed in the room. Cohen's face received it with the stillness of a man who has been trained to receive it, who was prepared for the possibility that the name would come, and has a performance ready. The performance was good. It held his expression in place, and kept his hands where they were, and maintained the quality of his breathing. But Zora stood up. She rose from her lying position in the corner, with the fluid deliberateness of a cheetah that has decided something requires closer attention, and she stood facing Cohen across the room, and looked at him with the absolute focused attention of an animal that has registered a change and is processing it. She did not approach. She simply stood. And Daniel Cohen, who had been maintaining his performance with considerable skill, lost it for 4 seconds. It was not dramatic. It was not a collapse. It was 4 seconds in which the performance went transparent, in which the face behind the face became briefly visible, the face of a man who is not guilty of what he has said he is guilty of, and who is frightened not for himself but for someone else, and who is very, very tired. 4 seconds. Then the performance returned. But Wolfe had seen it. I had seen it, and Zora, who had returned to standing rather than lying, continued to stand, and continued to look at Cohen with the patient attention of something that has registered what it needed to register. 2 years, Cohen said. His voice was steady. "I've known her 2 years. You know what was done to her by Harlan Greer," Wolfe said. "The correspondence, the sale, the retained items. I know what she told me," Cohen said carefully. "You know she went to Greer's office Tuesday evening," Wolfe said. A pause. "I know what I told the police," Cohen said. "You told the police a version of Tuesday evening's events that was given to you by Clare Voss," Wolfe said. "You memorized it and delivered it as your own account. You did this because you love her, and because what was done to her had already cost her a great deal, and you were not willing to let it cost her this too." He paused. "You told her this on the telephone from a payphone at 9:15 Wednesday morning, after you had already given the account to the police." Cohen was very still. Zora was very still. The office was very still. "You have information about Clare," Cohen said. His voice had changed, not broken, changed. The careful flatness of a performance replaced by the careful flatness of a man protecting something real. "I have information about everything," Wolfe said. "The secondary operation, the letters, Gerald Voss's involvement, Ruth Kane, Thomas Ellery, the filing cabinet and what it contains." He paused. "I have, Mr. Cohen, the complete picture. and I intend to use it to withdraw your confession and identify the actual circumstances of Harlan Greer's death in a manner that does not require Clare Voss to be destroyed by the process." Cohen looked at him. The performance was entirely gone now. What was there instead was the face of a man hearing something he does not dare believe and is trying not to hope for, because hoping will cost him something if he is wrong. "Can you do that?" he said. It was the same question I had asked Wolfe 2 days ago. "I intend to," Wolfe said, which was not the same as yes, and was better than yes because it was honest. "But I need your help, and I need Clare Voss's help, and I need both of you to trust that what I am doing is the best available path through a situation that has no perfect exit." Cohen was quiet for a long moment. He looked at Zora, who was still standing, still watching him, then at Wolfe, then at his hands. "What do you need?" he said. "First," Wolfe said, "tell me in your own words, not the account you were given, your own words, what Clare told you on Tuesday night, before you went to the police, what she actually said." And Cohen told him. "It took 15 minutes and I wrote all of it, and what he told us was substantially what Clare had told me on Riverside Drive, with the additions that come from a first-hand account given in distress to someone trusted. The specific words Greer had used when he described what he intended to do with the retained correspondence, which were worse than Clare had conveyed to me, and which explained more completely than anything else why she had picked up the letter opener." When Cohen finished, Wolfe looked at him for a moment. "The account you gave the police," he said. "The 3 errors in it. The letter opener position, the time, the whiskey glass. You did not know they were errors." "I didn't know the details of the scene," Cohen said. "She told me what she remembered. I told the police what she told me." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and those 3 errors are what will unravel the confession. They are irreconcilable with the physical evidence in ways that can be demonstrated to Inspector Kramer's satisfaction, without requiring anyone to explain how they came to be errors." He paused. "Your confession will be withdrawn. The investigation will be reopened on the basis of the physical inconsistencies, and the investigation will be directed by the information I provide toward Greer's secondary operation and the people connected to it, which will produce a resolution that accounts for what actually happened without requiring a specific individual to be tried for it." Cohen looked at him steadily. "You're going to protect her." "I am going to arrange circumstances in which she is not required to be unprotected," Wolfe said. "It is not the same thing, and I want you to understand the distinction. I cannot make what happened not have happened. I can arrange what happens next." "And what happens next?" Cohen said. "Next," Wolfe said, "you call your attorney and tell him you are withdrawing the confession on the grounds that you gave a false statement under emotional distress. You do this tomorrow morning. You tell no one else until it is done." He paused. "Then you wait. Within 6 days I will have closed this case in a manner that I believe will satisfy both the law and the situation." Cohen looked at him for a long time, then at Zora, who had not moved. "She's been standing since I said Clare's name," he said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "Does she do that often?" "She has not done it before," Wolfe said. "In my experience, her judgment is reliable." Cohen looked at Zora for another moment. Something in his face went quiet in the way of a man who has been carrying something at high tension for 5 days and has just been given permission to lower it slightly, not put it down, not yet, but lower it to a height that is survivable. "All right," he said. He stood. He looked at Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe, whatever this costs, whatever your fee is—" "Your sister has retained me," Wolfe said. "The fee is her business and mine. Yours is to make the telephone call tomorrow morning, and then to be patient while I work." He picked up his book. "Mr. Goodwin will see you out." I walked Cohen to the door. At the threshold he stopped and looked back at the office, at the room with its desk and its books and its Cato and its Zora, who was still standing in the corner, watching the space where he had been sitting. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "If I can," I said. "Is she going to be all right?" he said. "Clare." I looked at him, 34 years old, a man who had walked into a police precinct and given away the next several decades of his life without hesitation and without telling anyone he was going to do it, for a woman who had already been through enough and who he had decided should not have to go through this too. "Wolfe said he intends to," I said. "In 11 years that has always been sufficient." He nodded and went down the steps, and I watched him go, and went back inside. Wolfe was behind his desk with Zora back in her corner. She had returned to lying the moment Cohen left the building, which I noted without mentioning, and he was not reading his book. He was looking at the window with the expression of deep internal arrangement. I sat at my desk. "The resolution," I said. "You told him you could arrange circumstances. What circumstances?" "Gerald Voss," Wolfe said. "He is the key. He created the conditions for Tuesday evening. He has been managing Greer's operation from within a complicit partnership for 30 years. He called Ruth Kane to clear the field. He went to the office the day after and searched for the retained correspondence. He paused. He is not innocent. He is also Clare's father, and he acted in his fashion to protect her, and destroying him entirely destroys her through a different mechanism than the one Cohen's confession was meant to prevent. So you need him without destroying him, I said. I need him cooperative, Wolfe said. A cooperative Gerald Voss can provide the documentation of Greer's secondary operation that redirects the investigation away from Tuesday evening's events and toward the broader criminal enterprise. A cooperative Gerald Voss becomes a witness rather than a subject. A cooperative Gerald Voss is a man who made a telephone call to Ruth Kane on Tuesday morning because he was concerned about her welfare, not because he was clearing the field for a murder. That's a significant reframing, I said. It is a reframing that is not entirely dishonest, Wolfe said. He was concerned about Ruth Kane's welfare, among other things. He paused. I will speak with him directly, tomorrow. You will arrange it. What makes you think he'll come? Because Saul has given us the documentation of his payments to Greer, Wolfe said, and his retention of the private investigator, and the termination of that investigator 6 weeks ago. Gerald Voss has spent 60 years managing situations before they manage him. When he understands that I have the shape of his situation, he will come, because coming is how you manage things. He picked up his book. Zora settled deeper into her corner. Kato was still beside the desk. Outside, the November afternoon was going grey and cold in the specific way of November afternoons that have decided the day is over. 6 days. I called Gerald Voss's office number, which Saul had included in his report, and reached a personal secretary, who told me Mr. Voss was not available. I told her that Nero Wolfe would like to speak with Mr. Voss at 10 o'clock Monday morning at the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street in connection with a matter that required his personal attention, and that Mr. Wolfe would appreciate a prompt confirmation. She took the message with the professional courtesy of a woman accustomed to receiving messages for a powerful man, and said she would relay it. Gerald Voss called back at 4:15. He came to the phone himself, which told me he had been waiting for exactly this call, and had been deciding how to handle it, and had decided that handling it directly was preferable to the alternative. His voice was low, controlled, and had the quality that Ruth Kane had described. The quality of a man for whom English was not the first language of his youth, though he had been speaking it for long enough that the quality was subtle, a flavor rather than an accent. 10 o'clock, he said. I will be there. He hung up. I told Wolfe, who nodded without looking up from his book. Ajax came in from the hall and did his circuit of the office, and went back out. Juno appeared in the doorway, looked at the room and withdrew. The brownstone settled into its dinner-hour rhythms. Fritz made lamb chops, which Wolfe received with the gratitude that excellent lamb chops deserve, and we ate, and 6 days became 5, and outside the brownstone the city went about its business, and inside it 4 animals kept their positions, and a man in a custom-made chair read his book and thought, and the shape of the resolution became clearer in the thinking, though it was not yet clear enough to name. Chapter 6. The Silent Partner. Gerald Voss arrived at 10 o'clock Monday morning in a car that he did not drive himself. I watched from the window as the black Cadillac pulled up in front of the brownstone, and a driver who was built like a man accustomed to being useful in situations that require usefulness got out and opened the rear door, and Gerald Voss stepped onto the sidewalk and looked at the brownstone, with the expression of a man who has arrived at a situation he has been managing in his mind for several days, and is now required to manage in person. He was 63, broad-shouldered, with white hair cut close, and a face that had been handsome once, and was now simply authoritative, the face of a man who stopped needing to be handsome when he was 40, and has not missed it. He wore a coat that had been made for him rather than bought, which is a distinction most people cannot see and some people cannot stop seeing. He looked at the brownstone for exactly 3 seconds, and then came up the steps. Fritz opened the door before he rang. He came into the hall and looked at Juno, who was at her intersection, and who looked back at him with the reading attention she brings to everyone who enters the brownstone. He looked at her for a moment, and then at me, and I introduced myself and showed him to the office. He came through the doorway and did what everyone does, looked at Kato beside the desk, looked at Wolfe, and then found Zora in her corner. He looked at Zora for longer than most people do. Not with fear, not with the startled reassembly of the unprepared, but with the focused attention of a man who has encountered something unexpected, and is taking its measure before he responds to it. Zora looked back at him with the absolute patience of an animal that has all the time available and intends to use it. Then Gerald Voss sat in the red leather chair, folded his hands in his lap, and looked at Wolfe. "Mr. Wolfe," he said. Mr. Voss, Wolfe said. Thank you for coming. I don't believe I had a choice, Voss said. Not bitterly, factually. The statement of a man who understands the geometry of his situation and is not going to pretend otherwise. You had a choice, Wolfe said. You made the right one. That is worth noting. He reached for his beer, considered it, set it down. I will tell you what I know, and then I will tell you what I intend to do with it, and then you will tell me whether you can help me do it. That is the structure of this conversation. Proceed, Voss said. Nero sabat huarad law, tril pro sabat. Wolfe proceeded. He laid it out with the precision he brings to everything. The 30-year partnership, the secondary operation, the document and manuscript trade, the legitimate and illegitimate dimensions of it, the specific instance of Clare's correspondence 2 years ago, and the retained items that Greer had used 6 weeks ago to arrange a second extraction, the private investigator Voss had retained and terminated, the payments Voss had been making to Greer that had the structure of blackmail rather than profit-sharing, the telephone call to Ruth Kane at 11:30 Tuesday morning, the visit to the 4th floor filing cabinet Wednesday afternoon. He said all of this in the tone he uses when he is presenting established facts, not accusatory, not sympathetic, simply accurate, the tone of a man reading a map he has drawn himself. Gerald Voss listened without expression. He was very still in the red leather chair, the stillness of a man who has been in difficult rooms before and has learned that stillness is the most useful thing you can bring to them. He did not interrupt. He did not qualify. He listened to the complete account, and when it was finished he looked at Wolfe for a moment, and then at Zora, and then back at Wolfe. You know about Clare, he said. Yes, Wolfe said. A silence. Not a long one. Gerald Voss was not a man who needed long silences to collect himself, but a silence of a specific quality, the quality of a man absorbing confirmation of something he had hoped had not yet been confirmed. How much do you know, he said. Everything, Wolfe said. What she told Goodwin on Riverside Drive, what Cohen told me yesterday afternoon, the 3 errors in the confession that prove Cohen was not in that office. He paused. Everything, Mr. Voss. Voss looked at his hands. They were the hands of a man who has built things solid, square, with the specific quality of hands that have been used for purposes beyond signing documents. He looked at them for a moment with the expression of a man conducting an inventory. I did not arrange it, he said. I want you to understand that. I do understand it, Wolfe said. You arranged the conditions. You did not arrange the act. The distinction is legally significant and morally complex, and I intend to give it the weight it deserves in the resolution. He paused. But I need your help to construct that resolution. What kind of help? Voss said. The documentation, Wolfe said. Everything your private investigator compiled over 8 months on Greer's secondary operation. The financial records, the transaction records, the names of buyers and sellers, and the specific documents involved. All of it. He paused. And your testimony, if required, about the nature of the operation and your role in it. Voss was quiet for a moment. My testimony implicates me, he said. Your testimony as a cooperative witness, Wolfe said, implicates you in a 30-year financial partnership with a man who used that partnership for criminal purposes and who eventually used it to extort you directly. That is a different legal position than the position of a knowing and willing participant. He paused. I am not offering you immunity. I am not a prosecutor. I am telling you that the difference between a cooperative witness and a subject of investigation is significant and that cooperation is the better path. For me, Voss said. For Clare, Wolfe said. The room was very quiet. Zora had not moved. Cato had not moved. Outside, the November street was cold and grey, and completely indifferent to what was happening in the office. Voss looked at Wolfe for a long time. Then he said, She didn't tell me she was going to that meeting. No, Wolfe said. She didn't tell me what Greer had said to her on the telephone. Voss said. What he told her he intended to do. He paused. I found out afterward, from Greer's filing cabinet. I found his notes on the call, what he said to her. He stopped. What did he say to her? Wolfe said, quietly. Voss looked at the window. He told her that the retained correspondence included letters of a personal nature that he intended to have copied and distributed to specific individuals in the music world. Critics, venue directors, the people whose opinions determine a musician's career. He paused. He told her the distribution would happen unless she met his terms, which were financial, and he stopped again, which were not only financial. The office was very still. She went to that meeting, Voss said, knowing what he intended, if she refused. And she refused. He paused. I have been in many difficult situations in 60 years. I have managed most of them. I managed the situation 2 years ago badly. I managed it in the way I manage things, which is financially and quietly, and I did not understand what the managing cost her, what the privacy of it cost her, until afterward. He looked at Wolfe. When I found out 6 weeks ago that Greer had retained items I had not known about, I understood that my management had been incomplete, and I understood what he would do with the incompleteness. So you terminated the investigator, Wolfe said, and made the call to Ruth Kane. I cleared the field, Voss said. I am not going to pretend I did not understand what I was doing. I knew Clare was going to that meeting. I knew what Greer would say. I did not know what she would do. He paused. I told myself I did not know. I am not certain that is accurate. Wolfe looked at him steadily. Mr. Voss, the documentation. Voss reached into his coat and produced an envelope, thick, letter-sized, sealed. He held it for a moment, one moment, the moment of a man releasing something, and placed it on the desk. 8 months of work, he said. Every transaction, every buyer, every document, the complete record. He looked at the envelope. There are 41 instances over 15 years, 23 individuals whose correspondence or manuscripts were taken without consent, including Clare, including Ruth Kane. He paused, including 3 individuals whose names will be significant to federal investigators. Wolfe looked at the envelope and did not reach for it yet. The items in the filing cabinet, he said. The retained correspondence, the false panel in the 4th drawer. I found it Wednesday, Voss said. The panel. I did not know about the panel. I searched the cabinet and did not find it and left. He paused. You found it? Mr. Ellery told us where it was, Wolfe said. Something moved through Voss's expression. Not quite surprise, not quite the resignation of a man who has been outmaneuvered. Something between the two. Thomas, he said. Of course. He wants the publishing house to survive, Wolfe said. The legitimate portion of it. It should survive, Voss said. The books are real. The authors are real. What Harlan did alongside the books does not erase the books. He paused. I want that said somewhere in whatever comes next. The books are real. I will say it where it can be said, Wolfe told him. The items in the filing cabinet are relevant. They establish the specific leverage used on Clare and substantiate what Greer said to her on the telephone 6 weeks ago. They are evidence of the crime committed against her, not evidence of what she did in response. He paused. I intend to use them in that capacity. Voss looked at him. You are constructing a case, he said, against Greer's operation, against the secondary market, the buyers, the full 30-year enterprise. You are going to give that case to the appropriate authorities, and in the process you are going to establish that Harlan Greer was a man whose activities produced sufficient motive in sufficient people that his death becomes difficult to attribute cleanly. I am going to establish the truth, Wolfe said, which is that Harlan Greer spent 30 years acquiring what did not belong to him and using it against people who could not protect themselves, and that his death was a consequence of that enterprise. The specific mechanics of the consequence I will present with the precision the evidence permits and not beyond it. Voss was quiet for a moment. And Clare, he said. Clare Voss acted in response to a specific and credible threat made against her by a man who had already violated her privacy once and had demonstrated both the willingness and the capability to do so again, Wolfe said. The circumstances of what happened in that office are consistent with a confrontation that escalated beyond what either party anticipated, in conditions of extreme duress, involving a victim whose own actions had created those conditions. He paused. I am not the district attorney, and I am not the judge. I am telling you that the presentation of the full context, the 30 years, the secondary operation, the specific threat made to Clare 6 weeks ago, the retained correspondence and what Greer said he intended to do with it, creates a picture that is substantially different from the picture of a simple homicide. And Cohen, Voss said. His confession will be withdrawn today, Wolfe said. He is calling his attorney this morning. The withdrawal will be on the grounds of a false statement given under emotional distress, supported by 3 specific inconsistencies between the confession and the physical evidence. He paused. The investigation will be reopened. I will give Inspector Kramer sufficient material to redirect it toward the secondary operation and its consequences. What the investigation produces from that point is not mine to control. It is mine to ensure begins in the right direction. Voss looked at the envelope on the desk, then at Wolfe, then at Zora in her corner, who had been watching him for the entirety of the conversation with the focused patience of an animal that has decided this is worth attending to completely. She is remarkable, he said. She is, Wolfe agreed. My daughter, Voss said, has a quality like that. A quality of complete attention when something matters to her. He paused. She got it from her mother, not from me. He looked at his hands. I manage things. I have always managed things. My daughter Claire does not manage things. She lives them directly. It has cost her considerably. He was quiet for a moment. I should have stopped Harlan 15 years ago. When I first understood what the operation was, I managed it instead. I told myself it was contained. It was never contained. No, Wolfe said. It was not. Voss stood. He looked at the envelope on the desk. The items in the fourth drawer, he said. Claire's letters. When this is done, when it is resolved, I want them returned to her. They will be, Wolfe said. Voss looked at him for a last moment. You are a remarkable man, Mr. Wolfe, he said. It was not flattery. It was the assessment of a man who has encountered something he was not expecting and is honest enough to name it. I am a thorough one, Wolfe said. The two are sometimes confused. Voss left. The Cadillac took him away. I stood at the window and watched it go, and then turned back to the office. Wolfe had picked up the envelope. He was holding it in both hands the way he holds things that matter, with the full weight of his attention. 5 days, I said. Sufficient, he said. He set the envelope beside the one from the filing cabinet, which I had retrieved Saturday afternoon through means I will not specify, having spent 40 minutes in Greer's private office while the building was quiet and Roy the superintendent was engaged elsewhere, and which contained exactly what Ellery had said it contained. Claire's retained correspondence, 12 letters, personal, the kind that a private life accumulates and a public exposure destroys. 2 envelopes on the desk, 41 transactions documented in one, 12 letters in the other. 30 years of what a man had done, assembled in a brownstone on West 35th Street, on a Monday morning in November. Saul, Wolfe said. Yes, I said. He will take the documentation to the federal attorney's office this afternoon. I will speak with the attorney directly at 3 o'clock. He paused. And call Kramer. Tell him Nero Wolfe has information relevant to the Greer case and would like to meet tomorrow morning at 10. He's going to ask why not now. I said. Tell him I am engaged this afternoon, Wolfe said, and that what I have for him tomorrow will be worth the wait. He picked up his book. It will be. I called Saul, who came at noon and took the documentation with the careful efficiency of a man transporting something important and knowing it. I called Kramer, who asked why not now, and I told him what Wolfe said, and Kramer grumbled in the specific register he uses when he is going to do what you're asking and wants you to know it costs him something. The federal attorney called at 2:30, before Wolfe's scheduled call, which meant he had already received a preliminary report from Saul and had decided not to wait. He and Wolfe spoke for 50 minutes. I was at my desk and could hear Wolfe's end, measured, precise, the steady delivery of a man who has assembled something complete and is presenting it in the order that will be most useful to the person receiving it. When the call ended, Wolfe sat behind his desk and looked at the window for a moment. Well, I said, the federal attorney finds the documentation credible and actionable, Wolfe said. He will open a formal inquiry into Greer's secondary operation and its participants. The inquiry will encompass the full 30-year scope and all 41 documented instances. He paused. He also finds the context surrounding Greer's death, the specific threat made to Clare Voss, the retained correspondence, the history of what had been done to her, relevant to any assessment of the circumstances of that death. Relevant how? I said. Relevant in the way that context is always relevant. Wolfe said. It does not excuse, it explains, and explanation properly presented creates the conditions in which a prosecutor must weigh the full picture rather than the convenient portion of it. He paused. The federal attorney is an intelligent man. He understands what I am doing and why, and he finds it not objectionable. That's not the same as agreeing with it. I said. No. Wolfe said. It is better than agreement. Agreement implies he has adopted my position. Not objecting implies he has assessed it independently and found it defensible. He reached for his beer. There is a difference. I sat at my desk and thought about Clare Voss at her piano, on Riverside Drive, and Daniel Cohen on the telephone to his attorney this morning, and Margaret Cohen, who had come to the brownstone with $70 and a certainty, and had been right about the certainty in ways she had not fully known. Tomorrow, I said. The resolution. Tomorrow evening, Wolfe said. The office. I will see Kramer in the morning and give him what he needs. In the evening I will see the others. All of them? The ones the resolution requires, Wolfe said. Vivienne Greer, Thomas Ellery, Ruth Kane, Gerald Voss. He paused. Not Claire, not Daniel, not Margaret. He looked at me. The resolution I am constructing does not require Clare Voss to be in this office. It requires her to be elsewhere, at home, with her piano, in the life she has been trying to protect. He paused. That is what Daniel Cohen gave up his freedom to give her. I intend to give it to her through different means. And if Kramer doesn't accept the redirect tomorrow morning, I said. Wolfe looked at me with the expression he uses when I have asked a question he considers beneath the situation. He will accept it, he said. The documentation is comprehensive. The federal interest is established, and Kramer is an intelligent man who recognizes when a case has become larger than its immediate facts and responds accordingly. He picked up his book. He will accept it. I went to find Fritz and tell him there would be 4 guests tomorrow evening, which Fritz received with the equanimity of a man who has been feeding Wolfe's guests for 30 years and has learned that the number is always either fewer than expected or more than planned, and has provisioned accordingly. Ajax came through on his circuit, paused in the office doorway, looked at the 2 envelopes on the desk, and continued. Juno was at her intersection. Cato was beside the desk. Zora was in her corner, and she was looking at the window with the specific quality of attention she brings to things outside the brownstone's immediate geography, as though she can see further than the glass permits and is doing so. 5 days had become 1 night and 1 morning and 1 evening. The shape of the resolution was complete. What remained was the delivery of it. Chapter 7. The Office at Night. Kramer arrived at 10 Monday morning with Stebbins, which is his standard configuration for a meeting he considers significant. Kramer in front, Stebbins behind taking notes, the 2 of them filling a doorway with the combined authority of the New York Police Department and 20 years of dealing with Nero Wolfe. He came into the office and looked at the 4 animals in their positions and said, "That animal gets bigger every time I see it," which is what he says about Zora every time he sees her, and which is not true but reflects his genuine discomfort expressed in the only register he permits himself. He sat across from Wolfe and looked at the 2 envelopes on the desk with the expression of a man who has been told something significant is coming, and is deciding whether to be grateful or annoyed before he knows what it is. "The Greer case," he said. "The Greer case," Wolfe agreed, "which is not what it appears to be, and has not been from the beginning." He opened the larger envelope, Gerald Voss's documentation, and placed it on the desk facing Kramer. 8 months of investigation by a licensed private firm, commissioned by Gerald Voss, silent partner in Greer and Associates, documenting the secondary operation Harlan Greer ran alongside his publishing house for 30 years. Kramer looked at the top page. His expression went through 3 adjustments in approximately 4 seconds. Skepticism, attention, and the specific quality of a detective who has just seen something that changes the shape of what he thought he knew. He picked it up and read. He read for 20 minutes. Stebbins read over his shoulder. Wolfe drank beer and waited with the patience of a man who has given someone a gift and is allowing time for it to be properly received. When Kramer set it down, he looked at Wolfe with the expression he uses when he is going to say something he does not want to say. "This is a federal matter," he said. "The federal attorney's office is already engaged," Wolfe said. "I spoke with them yesterday afternoon. They find the documentation credible and have opened a formal inquiry." He paused. "Your involvement at the homicide level is both appropriate and necessary. The 2 inquiries are complementary." "The homicide," Kramer said. "Cohen confessed." "Cohen confessed." "Cohen gave a false statement," Wolfe said. "He will be withdrawing it today. His attorney will file the withdrawal this morning on the grounds of a statement given under emotional distress, supported by 3 specific inconsistencies between the confession and the physical evidence." He laid a single page on the desk, my summary of the 3 problems, written out cleanly the previous evening. The letter opener position. The timing relative to the cleaning crew's presence on the 5th floor. The whiskey glass. Kramer read it. He read it twice, which meant it was holding up. He set it down and looked at Wolfe with the expression of a man who has accepted that he is going to have his morning rearranged. "The confession is false," he said. "Not a question. The confession is a false statement given by a man who was not present at the scene and who obtained his account from a second-hand source who was present but whose memory of specific details was imperfect under stress," Wolfe said. "The 3 inconsistencies are irreconcilable with the physical evidence. No jury would sustain the conviction." "Then who killed Greer?" Kramer said. Wolfe looked at him steadily. "Harlan Greer spent 30 years acquiring private correspondence and personal documents from individuals without their knowledge or consent and selling them through a private market," he said. "He did this to 41 individuals over 15 years, documented in the material before you. He used retained items as leverage for additional extraction from the same individuals, a practice that constitutes criminal extortion in addition to the original theft." He paused. "The list of people with sufficient motive to have killed Harlan Greer is 41 names long, several of whom are significant enough that federal investigators will find their involvement in the operation more immediately pressing than the specific question of who was in that office Tuesday evening. Kramer looked at him for a long time. "You're telling me the case is broader than one killer," he said. "I'm telling you the case is 30 years of criminal enterprise that produced a victim with 41 motivated enemies," Wolfe said. "I am telling you that the physical evidence is inconsistent with the only confession you have. I am telling you that the federal inquiry will consume the principles of the operation for the foreseeable future." He paused. "I am also telling you that the person who was in that office Tuesday evening acted in response to a specific criminal threat made against them by Greer, a threat documented in the second envelope, and that the circumstances of that confrontation are substantially different from the circumstances of a premeditated homicide." Kramer looked at the second envelope. "What's in it?" "Private correspondence belonging to a specific individual," Wolfe said. "Retained by Greer without authorization and used as leverage to arrange a meeting on Tuesday evening. The individual attended that meeting. The meeting did not conclude as Greer intended." He paused. "The correspondence establishes both the criminal act committed against that individual and the specific nature of the threat made during the meeting. It is relevant to any assessment of the circumstances of Greer's death." "You're not going to tell me who," Kramer said. "I am going to let the evidence tell you," Wolfe said, "in its own time and in the appropriate venue. The federal inquiry will establish the full scope of the operation. The physical evidence will establish the impossibility of Cohen's confession. What the investigation produces from those two established facts is the proper work of your office, and I have no desire to perform it for you." He paused. "I have given you everything you need to proceed correctly. The direction you proceed in is yours." Kramer sat with this for a moment. He looked at Stebbins, who was still writing. He looked at the envelopes. He looked at Zora, who was looking at him with the patient attention she brings to people she has decided are worth watching. "That animal," Kramer said, "is always watching me." "She watches everyone," I said. "She watches you with particular attention. I've always taken it as a compliment." Kramer picked up the documentation. He picked up my three-problem summary. He looked at Wolfe with the expression of a man who has been given a significant gift by a man he finds professionally infuriating, and is deciding how to hold both of those facts simultaneously. "The federal attorney," he said, "will be in contact with you today," Wolfe said. "He is expecting your call." Kramer stood. He put on his hat. He looked at Wolfe with the expression he always uses at the end of these meetings, the expression of a man who has received more than he came with and is constitutionally opposed to saying so. "Next time," he said, "call me at the beginning." "I call you," Wolfe said, "precisely when calling you is useful. The beginning is rarely that moment." Kramer made a sound that was not quite a word, and went out. Stebbins followed with his notebook, and the expression of a man who has been taking notes in this office for 20 years and has learned to find it normal. The evening gathering was set for 7. I spent the afternoon on logistics, confirming arrivals, arranging the office, briefing Fritz on the number of guests and their dietary requirements, which I did not actually know, but Fritz asked as a matter of professional principle. I moved chairs. I checked the fire. I made sure Ajax's evening circuit would not bring him through the office during the assembly, which I mentioned to Ajax directly on the grounds that it never hurts, and he listened with the focused attention he brings to instructions before doing exactly what he was going to do anyway. At 6:30 I sat at my desk and looked at the room. The office at night has a quality it does not have during the day. The lamp on the desk throws a circle of amber that does not reach the corners, and the fire adds warmth without brightness, and the bookshelves recede into the dark in a way that makes the room feel larger and more serious than it is in morning light. It is the right room for the conclusion of a case. It has been the right room for the conclusion of many cases, and it knows it. Kauto was beside the desk. Juno was in the hallway. Ajax was on his circuit. Zora was in her corner, and she had been in her corner all day with the settled quality of an animal that knows something is coming and has chosen her position for it. At 6:55, Wolfe came down from the plant rooms and went to his chair and sat and looked at the room with the expression of a man surveying a field he has prepared and finding the preparation sufficient. "Ready," I said. "Yes," he said. He reached for the beer Fritz had placed on the desk. "They will all come." "You sound certain." I said. "Vivienne Greer comes because she has been performing composure for a week, and performance requires an audience," he said. "Thomas Ellery comes because he has made his decision and wants to see it honored. Ruth Kane comes because she has been waiting 2 years for someone to finish something, and it is almost finished. Gerald Voss comes because his daughter's situation is not yet resolved, and he will not leave it unattended." He drank. "They will all come." They all came. Vivienne Greer arrived first. At 7:03, in black that was still the widow's black and composure that was still the widow's composure, but that had over a week acquired the slightly strained quality of a performance extended beyond its design duration. She came into the office and looked at the arrangement of chairs and the animals in their positions, and sat in the chair I indicated with the automatic social grace of a woman, for whom sitting correctly in a room is as natural as breathing. She looked at Zora. Zora looked at her. Between the two of them, Vivienne Greer in her sustained performance and Zora in her absolute authenticity, there was a specific tension that I noted and that Wolfe, I was certain, noted too. Vivienne Greer was a woman who had been managing her presentation for 30 years of marriage to a man she understood completely and had chosen to be married to anyway, which is a specific kind of choice that produces a specific kind of person, and Zora, looking at her with the unmanageable directness of something that does not perform, was, I suspected, the first genuinely honest gaze Vivienne Greer had received in a very long time. She looked away first. Thomas Ellery arrived at 7:08 with the quiet manner of a man who has done something irrevocable and has made peace with it. He sat beside the bookshelf, which is where he had sat at his first meeting, and where he apparently preferred to be, walls at his back, room in front, the posture of a man who likes to see everything and be contained on one side. He looked at Wolfe with the expression of a man checking that the commitment he had made was still being honored. Wolfe gave him a brief nod that said it was. Ruth Kane came at 7:12, still in the working clothes of a novelist who has been at her desk and has come directly from it, and she sat in the chair nearest the door with the focused, contained energy of a woman who has been waiting 2 years for a specific thing and believes she is about to receive it. She looked at Wolfe with a directness that bordered on demand. He received it without flinching, which is the correct response. Gerald Voss arrived last at 7:15 exactly, with the punctuality of a man for whom time is a managed resource. He sat in the red leather chair, the last remaining, and looked at the room with the comprehensive attention of a man assessing a situation he has partly created and is now required to sit inside of. He looked at Zora last, and Zora looked at him, and between them passed the specific recognition of their previous meeting, something acknowledged without being named. Wolfe looked at all four of them. "Thank you for coming," he said. It was not a pleasantry, it was an acknowledgement that they had made a choice, and the choice would be honored. He began. He went in order, not chronological order, the order of revelation, which is different, which moves from the outer rings of the situation toward the center, establishing each layer before the next one is placed on top of it, so that when the center is reached it is inevitable rather than sudden. The publishing house first, 40 years of legitimate literary work. He said this, said it clearly and with the weight Ellery had asked for, that the books were real, and the authors were real, and the legacy was real. Ellery, beside the bookshelf, received this with the expression of a man hearing something he needed to hear, and had not been certain he would. Then the secondary operation, 30 years, 41 instances, the specific mechanism of acquisition and sale. The buyers, several of whom were significant enough that he named them without expression, which produced in the room the particular stillness of people hearing names they recognize. Ruth Kane, hearing the name of the man who had bought her letters, went very still in a specific way that I noted and did not write down. Then the leverage, the retained correspondence used as a tool of extortion, the specific pattern of Greer identifying what he held and arranging meetings in which his terms were presented as the alternative to exposure. He described this without naming Clare, named it as a pattern, documented and repeated, which it was. Then the false confession, the 3 inconsistencies. He laid them out with the precision of a man presenting evidence to a jury, specific, verifiable, irrefutable. Vivienne Greer, hearing this, looked at her hands and then at the window with the expression of a woman who has known something and has been waiting to see whether anyone else would know it. "Mrs. Greer," Wolfe said. She looked at him. "You were not surprised when your husband's assistant confessed," he said. "I observed this from your account and from the accounts of people who were present. You were not surprised because you knew the confession was false. You knew it was false because you knew who had been in your husband's office Tuesday evening." The room was very still, Cato beside the desk, Juno at the door, Ijax at the window, which is where he had been since the gathering began, still not patrolling, watching the street below with the focused attention he brings to things outside the brownstone's perimeter. Vivienne Greer looked at Wolfe for a long moment. "I knew about the operation," she said. Her voice was very controlled. "I have known for 20 years. I chose to know about it in the way one chooses, by not asking questions whose answers would require action." She paused. "When Harlan told me 6 weeks ago about the Voss girl and what he had retained and what he intended to do with it, I told him he was making a mistake." She paused. "He did not agree. Did you know Clare Voss would be in his office Tuesday evening? Wolfe said. I knew he had arranged a meeting, she said. I did not know with whom. She paused. When I found him, I called the physician, and not the police, which I have told myself was shock, but which was also it. She found him, I said. I was not in the habit of speaking during Wolfe's resolutions, but this had not been in any account I had received, and it changed the shape of things. You found him before anyone else? Yes, Vivienne Greer said. I came to the office at 8:30. The building was closed. I had a key. She paused. I found him and I called Dr. Fell, who has been our physician for 20 years, and who understood when I called what kind of call it was. He came, he confirmed, and then the building superintendent found them when he came to check on a noise report from a neighboring office, and the police were called. She looked at her hands. I did not arrange the confession. I did not contact Cohen. I simply did not say what I knew. Which was, Wolfe said. Wolfe said. That the meeting had been with a young woman, she said. That the young woman had reason. That what my husband had done to her was... She stopped, started again. That what my husband had done to her was consistent with what my husband had done to people for 30 years, and that I had chosen to be married to him anyway, and that the bill for that choice was something I had been accumulating for 20 years and had finally been presented with. She was quiet for a moment. I chose not to say what I knew because saying it would not have brought him back and would have destroyed someone who had already been destroyed enough. The fire made its small sound. Outside the window the city was dark and cold and completely indifferent. Wolfe looked at her for a moment. Your choice, he said, complicated the situation considerably. It allowed a false confession to stand for a week and required resources to be applied to its unraveling that would otherwise have been unnecessary. He paused. It also, in its way, reflects a moral assessment of the situation that I do not find entirely without merit. He looked at the room. I am not in the business of judging the choices people make in the hours after their husbands are found dead. I am in the business of establishing the truth. He looked at Gerald Voss. You called Ruth Kane at 11:30 Tuesday morning, he said. You told her the meeting would not be necessary, and she should cancel. Yes, Voss said. You knew Clare was going to that meeting. Yes. You understood what Greer would say to her, and you understood what Clare was capable of in response. A pause. I understood the situation, Voss said. I cleared the field. I have said this already and I will not say it differently. No, Wolfe agreed. You will not. He looked at Ruth Kane. The call you received Tuesday morning. Yes, she said. You cancelled your appointment. Yes. And attended a dinner party. Yes. Which establishes your whereabouts for the evening, Wolfe said, definitively and completely. He looked at her with a directness that was not unkind. Your specific grievance against Harlan Greer, the letters, the sale, the specific buyer, is documented in the material provided to the Federal Attorney's Office and to Inspector Kramer. You will be contacted by investigators. Your cooperation is advisable and I believe you intend to give it. Everything I know, Ruth Kane said. Every detail. I have been waiting 2 years to give it. Good, Wolfe said. He looked at the room. Harlan Greer, he said, was killed by someone he had wronged in the specific and repeated way he wronged people, by taking what did not belong to him and using it as a weapon. The person who was in that office Tuesday evening was there because Greer had made a specific and credible threat that would have destroyed a life already significantly damaged by his previous actions. The confrontation was not planned. The outcome was not intended. The circumstances are being presented to the appropriate authorities in the full context of 30 years of criminal enterprise that created the conditions for exactly what occurred. He paused. The investigation will proceed. The federal inquiry will proceed. What they produce is in the hands of people whose job it is to weigh these things. My job was to establish what actually happened and ensure it was presented with the precision and context it deserves. He looked at each of them in turn. That is what I have done, he said. It was at this moment, in the specific silence that follows the conclusion of a Wolfe resolution, the silence in which the room absorbs what it has been told and decides what to do with it, that Ajax left the window. He crossed the room in 3 strides, which for Ajax is fast, not running but moving with the focused directness of a dog who has registered something and is responding to it, and he went to the hallway doorway and stopped, and looked at the front of the house with the low continuous sound that means something outside has changed. I was at the door in 4 seconds. The front stoop, empty. The street below, the car parked across from the brownstone, the same car, or a car with the same posture of deliberate stillness that a parked car has when it has not moved for a long time and has someone in it. I went back inside and picked up the telephone and called the precinct number, not Kramer's direct line, the precinct, and asked for a patrol car to check a vehicle parked across from 918 West 35th Street and gave the plate number I had noted the previous week. Then I went back to the office. The room was as I had left it. 4 people in their chairs, 4 animals in their positions. Wolfe looking at me with the specific quality of attention he uses when he wants information without asking for it in front of others. "Outside," I said. "Being handled." He nodded once and looked at the room. "We are finished," he said. "You each know what is required of you in the coming days. Cooperation with the appropriate inquiries, accuracy in your accounts, and the understanding that the resolution I have constructed is the best available path through a situation that has no perfect exit." He paused. "I do not offer perfect exits. I offer accurate ones." They left in the order they had arrived. Vivienne Greer first, with the contained composure of a woman who has said the truest thing she has said in 20 years, and is deciding what to do with the lightness of it. Ellery next, with the expression of a man who has delivered something irrevocable and has found the delivery cleaner than anticipated. Ruth Kane, who paused at the door and looked at Wolfe and said, "Simply thank you," and left. Gerald Voss last, who looked at Wolfe for a moment and then at Zora, and then went out without speaking, which was itself a kind of statement. I went to the window and watched the street. The patrol car had arrived, 2 officers at the parked vehicle. A brief exchange, the driver's door opening, and a figure getting out, young in dark clothing, with the particular quality of someone who had been sitting in that car for a very long time and had been doing so on someone's instruction. He was not Carver. He was not anyone I recognized. He was someone's mechanism, not Gerald Voss's. Voss was inside when the car arrived. Someone else's, someone connected to the secondary operation and the buyers whose names Wolfe had spoken in the resolution and who had been watching the brownstone to see what was going to come out of it. The officers handled it. I watched until they had the man in the patrol car and drove away, and the street was clear and ordinary. I went back to the office. Wolfe was behind his desk with his beer, Cato beside him, Zora in her corner. Ajax had returned to his circuit, the threat resolved, the perimeter restored to its normal state. Juno was at her intersection. "The car," Wolfe said. "One of the buyers," I said. "My guess, someone who heard his name and wanted to know what Wolfe was doing with it." "He will find out soon enough," Wolfe said, "through the appropriate channels and at the appropriate velocity." He reached for his book. "Tomorrow morning, Daniel Cohen. His attorney will have filed the withdrawal by now." I said, "Yes, but I want to speak with him directly, not about the case. The case is concluded. About what comes next." He paused. "And Clare Voss. And Clare Voss. She should hear from me directly. Goodwin tomorrow afternoon. Riverside Drive." "I'll call ahead," I said. "Do," he said, and opened to his page. The fire had burned to the quality it reaches at 10 o'clock, still warm, producing more light than heat, the coals settling into their final configuration. The office was very quiet. The brownstone was very quiet. Outside the November street was cold and clear, and the lamppost threw its circle of light on the empty pavement where the car had been. 4 animals in their positions, a man in his chair with his book and his beer, and the completed shape of a case that had required him to be not just right, but precise about what he did with being right. The brownstone breathed. Tomorrow was Chapter 8. Chapter 8, What Daniel Cohen Gets Back. The withdrawal was filed at 9:15 Tuesday morning. Daniel Cohen's attorney, a man named Herbert Marsh, no relation to Cecile, who had been practicing criminal defense in Manhattan for 30 years, and who had received the instruction to file with the particular focused calm of a lawyer who has been given a genuinely defensible position and knows it, filed the withdrawal with the district attorney's office and simultaneously submitted my 3-problem summary as supporting documentation, which Wolfe had authorized and which Marsh had received with the expression of a man being handed something he had been hoping to find for a week. I know the timing because Marsh called the brownstone at 9:20 to confirm it was done, and I took the call at my desk with my second coffee and noted the time and went to tell Wolfe, who was in the plant rooms with the orchids and Theodore, and received the news with a nod that meant good, and went back to the Phalaenopsis. At 10 o'clock Daniel Cohen arrived. He came alone again, as he had on Sunday, but differently. Sunday he had come with the compressed, careful quality of a man maintaining a performance under significant internal pressure. This morning he came with the expression of a man who has put something down and is still slightly surprised by the absence of the weight. Not light exactly. The situation was not resolved enough for light, but unburdened in the specific way of someone who has been carrying a particular thing and has been told officially and legally that they no longer have to carry it. Juno met him at the door. She went to him with the direct familiarity of a dog who has assessed someone previously and has retained the assessment, not starting from the beginning, continuing from where she left off. Cohen reached down and touched her head, and she fell into step beside him as Fritz showed him to the office, which is not something Juno does with many people, and which I noted. He came in and sat in the red leather chair and looked at Wolfe. "It's done," he said. "Yes," Wolfe said. They accepted the withdrawal. They had no basis to refuse it, Wolfe said. The inconsistencies are material and documented. The district attorney's office is simultaneously receiving a briefing from the federal attorney regarding the full scope of Greer's operation. The withdrawal of your confession is the least complicated element of this morning's proceedings. He paused. "How are you?" It was not a question Wolfe asks. In 11 years I have heard him ask it perhaps 4 times, each time in circumstances that warranted it, each time with the same quality, not social, not reflexive, genuinely interrogative. Cohen received it as what it was. "I don't know yet," he said, which was the honest answer. "No," Wolfe agreed. "You won't for some time." He looked at Cohen with the direct attention he brings to people he has decided deserve it. "What you did was not rational," he said. "It was not strategically sound. It was not in your interest by any calculation I can apply to it." He paused. "It was also the act of a person who understood what mattered and acted on that understanding without reservation. I find that not easy to dismiss." Cohen looked at him for a moment. "Is she going to be all right?" he said. The same question he had asked me at the door on Sunday. Still the same question. Still the only one that mattered to him. "The situation is substantially better than it was a week ago," Wolfe said. The full context of what Greer did to her, the original theft, the retained correspondence, the specific threat he made on the telephone 6 weeks ago, what he said to her in that office, is now part of the official record. The federal inquiry will establish Greer as a man who committed 30 years of criminal acts against 41 individuals and who used his final victim's own stolen property as a weapon against her. He paused. That context does not erase what happened. It frames it, and framing, properly done, determines how a thing is seen and therefore how it is treated. "And the district attorney," Cohen said, "what does he do with the framing?" "The district attorney," Wolfe said, "is an intelligent man facing a case in which the victim was a 30-year criminal, whose death occurred in circumstances of documented extreme provocation, whose killer acted without premeditation in response to a specific and credible threat, and whose operation is now the subject of a federal inquiry that will consume his office's attention and the city's attention for the foreseeable future." He looked at Cohen. "I will not tell you the outcome. I am not the district attorney, and I cannot tell you what he will do. I can tell you that what he has been given by this investigation is a complete and honest picture of a complex situation, and that complete honest pictures are the best available foundation for just outcomes." "That's not a guarantee," Cohen said. "No," Wolfe said, "it is not. I do not offer guarantees. I offer accuracy." He paused. "Clare Voss has a father with significant resources and the will to apply them. She has documentation of the crimes committed against her that is comprehensive and damning. She has the context of what was said to her and what she faced in that office, and she has the fact that the man who confessed to protect her has withdrawn that confession, which means the investigation proceeds from the truth rather than from a convenient fiction, which is always the better starting position." He looked at Cohen directly. "What she has because of the work of this office, and because of what you did, which is a different kind of contribution, and not one I will diminish by comparing it to mine." Cohen looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Zora, who was in her corner watching him with the patient attention she had maintained throughout. She had not stood today, had not needed to. The performance was gone. What was in the red leather chair was simply Daniel Cohen, which was sufficient. "Sunday," he said. "When she stood, your cheater." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Why did she do that?" Wolfe considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "I have observed her for 8 months," he said. "She stands when she has registered something that requires closer attention, not threat. She responds to threat differently, something more specific." He paused. "I believe she stands when she detects the specific quality of a person who is not what they are presenting as, not a liar exactly, something more precise, a person whose interior reality and exterior presentation are significantly misaligned." He looked at Zora. "You were presenting as guilty. You were not guilty. The misalignment was considerable." Cohen looked at Zora. She looked at him. "She knew," he said. "She registered," Wolfe said. "Whether knowing is the right word for what she does, I am not qualified to say, but she registered something that your performance could not conceal from her, and the registering of it was useful to me. He picked up his beer. She has been useful to this office in ways I did not anticipate when she arrived. I find that I am consistently underestimating her. Cohen almost smiled. It was brief and not complete, but it was there, which was the first time I had seen anything approaching it on his face since he came through the door on Sunday. "Thank you," he said, to Wolfe. Then he looked at me. "Both of you. Your sister retained us," I said. She had $70 and a certainty. The certainty was worth considerably more than the $70. He stood. He looked at the room, the desk, the books, the animals in their positions, with the expression of a man looking at a place he will remember. Is it all right if I come back sometime?" he said. "Not for a case, just." He paused. "I'd like to see how she is." He looked at Zora. "If that's not a strange thing to ask." Wolfe looked at him. "It is not a strange thing," he said. "You are welcome." Cohen nodded and went out. Fritz showed him to the door. I heard it close. The office settled back into its morning quiet. I drove to Riverside Drive at 2 in the afternoon. The Hudson was grey and wide, and the sky above it was the color of an old coin, and the trees along the bank had shed the last of their leaves and stood in their winter configuration, bare and precise. I parked and went up, and the doorman rang Clare Voss without my asking, and she said to send me up. She was at the piano when I came in. Not practicing, sitting at it, both hands on the keys but not playing, in the position of a person who goes to the instrument the way other people go to a chair by a window when they need to think. She looked up when I came in and straightened, and the posture of the pianist returned automatically, the held quality of the upper body, and she looked at me with the expression of a woman who has been waiting for this visit and has been preparing what she wants to say. I sat across from her and told her everything, not the case mechanics. She knew the broad shape of those from Daniel, who had called her the previous evening after leaving the brownstone. I told her the specific things Wolfe had said and done and arranged, the documentation given to the federal attorney, the 3-problem summary that had undone the confession, the resolution in the office the previous evening, what Wolfe had said about context and framing, and the difference between a complete honest picture and a convenient fiction, what Vivienne Greer had said, what her father had said. She listened without interrupting. Her hands were in her lap. She was very still in the way of someone receiving a great deal of information and organizing it as it arrives. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "My father," she said. "He came to the brownstone yesterday morning," I said. "He gave Wolfe the documentation from his investigator, 8 months of work on Greer's operation." I paused. He also told Wolfe what he had done, the call to Ruth Kane, what he had understood and what he had chosen. She looked at the piano. "He knew I was going," she said. "I didn't tell him. He found out. He always finds out. He called me Monday morning, and I told him I was going regardless of what he said, and he didn't argue. He just said to be careful." She paused. I thought he meant about the streets, about coming home late. She was quiet for a moment. "He cleared the field." "Yes," I said. "He let me walk in there," she said, not bitterly, processing. "He knew what Greer would say, and he let me go. He also," I said carefully, "went to that office the next morning and spent 40 minutes trying to get back what had been used against you. He didn't find it. The panel was hidden, but he tried." I paused, "and he gave everything he had to Wolfe to make this right, everything his investigator had built, his own testimony, his cooperation, which will cost him something." I paused. "He is not simple. What he did is not simple. Wolfe said it is legally significant and morally complex and deserves the weight of both of those things." She looked at the Hudson through the window, the grey wide water going south toward the harbor. "I know," she said finally. "I know he's not simple. He's been managing things my entire life. Managing me, managing situations, managing the space around me, so nothing gets too close." She paused. "Except this time something got very close, and he managed the space around it and let me handle it myself, and you did," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were the eyes of a person who has lived through something and has not yet determined what it means, and is going to be determining it for a long time. "Daniel withdrew the confession," she said. "This morning," I said. "It's done. He should never have." She stopped, started again. "I told him not to. On the telephone Wednesday morning, I told him to go back and retract it. He said it was done. He said the thing that had been done to you had already cost you enough." I said. She was very still. "He told you that?" "He told Wolfe," I said. "Wolfe told me." She looked at the piano for a long time. I did not say anything because there was nothing to say, and because some rooms need to be quiet sometimes, and this was one of those times. Then she said, "What happens now?" "The federal inquiry," I said. The investigators will contact you. You'll need to give your account. What happened to the letters 2 years ago? What Greer said to you 6 weeks ago? What happened in his office Tuesday evening? Your father's attorney will be present. Wolfe recommends full cooperation and complete accuracy. I paused. The outcome? I can't tell you the outcome. Wolfe doesn't offer guarantees. He offers accuracy, and accuracy is what you have. Is that enough? She said. It was the question everyone in this case had asked in one form or another. Margaret Cohen, asking it about her brother's innocence. Cohen asking it about Clare's future. Clare asking it now about justice and its limits, and what accuracy buys you when the situation has no perfect exit. In my experience, I said, it's what there is, and in my experience, Wolfe makes it go as far as it can go, which is further than most people manage. I paused. It'll have to be enough because it's what we have, but it's real, and it's honest, and it's built correctly. That's something. She nodded slowly. She looked at the piano. Then she put her hands on the keys, both hands, the full position of a person about to play, and held them there for a moment without playing. Tell Mr. Wolfe, she said, that I'm grateful. I will, I said, and tell him. She paused. Tell him the cheater has good judgment. I told her I would pass it along, and went back down to the car, and drove back to the brownstone in the late afternoon with the Hudson visible in the mirror, until I turned east and lost it. I drove Margaret Cohen home to Queens that evening. Wolfe had asked me to go to Queens and tell her in person that it was concluded, which is not something he usually asks because delivering conclusions in person is not usually required, and I am a busy man with a car that has a finite amount of fuel. He asked it because Margaret Cohen had come to the brownstone with $70 and a certainty, and had been right in ways she had not known the full extent of, and Wolfe has a specific regard for people who are right in ways they cannot fully justify, and who act on the rightness anyway. She was in her apartment in Astoria when I arrived at 5:30, a small apartment, neat, with the quality of a place that is lived in carefully by someone for whom careful living is a deliberate practice rather than a habit. School books on the table, $35 on the mantelpiece in an envelope with my name on it, which was the second installment of her fee, and which she had prepared in advance of knowing whether I was coming. I told her it was concluded. The confession withdrawn, the investigation redirected, the federal inquiry opened, the full context of the situation established, and in the hands of the people whose job it was to weigh it. I told her Daniel was free, and the case was closed, and Wolfe's office was satisfied with the outcome in the ways that it could be satisfied, which were the honest ways. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and listened, and when I finished she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He's going to be all right." It was not a question. It was the same quality of certainty she had brought to the brownstone 8 days ago. Not hope, not prayer, certainty. The certainty of a woman who knows her brother, the way you know the people you grew up with, the knowledge that is older than words. "Yes," I said, "I think he is." She looked at the envelope on the mantelpiece. "The money," she said. "Keep it," I said. "Wolfe settled with the fee." She looked at me. "I gave you $35, she said. "That's not a detective fee. It's a retainer," I said. "The case produced results. The results are the fee." I paused. Wolfe found it satisfying. The case. He doesn't charge for cases he finds satisfying. That's not a policy I've ever seen in writing, but it applies with some regularity. She almost smiled. It was the same quality as her brother's almost smile that morning. Brief, not complete there. We sat at the kitchen table for a few more minutes, and she asked me questions about the case that she had a right to ask, and I answered the ones that were hers to know, and said I couldn't answer the others, which she accepted without pushing, because Margaret Cohen was a woman who understood limits and respected them, which is a rarer quality than it should be. When I left, she walked me to the door, and at the threshold she stopped and looked at me with the direct attention that was entirely her own, not her brother's quality, not a family resemblance, her own specific way of looking at a situation and seeing it clearly. "Tell Mr. Wolfe," she said, "that I knew." "He knows you knew," I said. "It's why he took the case." She nodded. I went down the stairs and out into the Astoria evening, cold and clear, and drove back to Manhattan. I got back to the brownstone at 7. Fritz was in the kitchen producing something that involved veal and a great deal of careful attention, which meant it was going to be extraordinary, and Wolfe was at his desk with his book and his beer, and the 4 animals in their evening positions, and the office in the state it reaches at 7 o'clock in November, when a case has closed and the routine has resumed, and everything is exactly where it should be. I sat at my desk. Wolfe looked up from his book. "Riverside Drive," he said. "She said to tell you the cheater has good judgment." I said. Wolfe looked at Zora. Zora was in her corner, and she was looking at Wolfe with the settled attention of an animal that has done what it came to do on a given day, and is content with the doing of it. She is correct, Wolfe said, and went back to his book. I opened my notebook and began the case notes. The notes for this one ran to 13 pages, which is one more than the kind death, and one fewer than the mountain, which felt about right for a case of this specific weight and complexity. On the last page I wrote the additional line. This time it came quickly. I did not cross anything out. Margaret Coyne came through the door with $70 and a certainty, and she was right. She was right in the way that people are right, when they know something that cannot be proven, and act on the knowing anyway. Nero Wolfe is usually the smartest person in any given situation. This week the smartest thing in the situation was a schoolteacher from Queens with $35 left in her budget, and the absolute unshakable knowledge of her brother. Wolfe would not say this. I am saying it in the case notes where he will not read it, although knowing him he probably will. I closed the notebook. Kramer called at 8. He called the office line and I took it, and he said without preamble, the district attorney is looking at a reduced charge. The context, all of it, the operation, the threat, the correspondence, the context is being weighed. Wolfe will be glad to hear it, I said. Tell Wolfe, Kramer said, that the next time he has a case that's going to involve federal investigators and a 30-year criminal operation and a false confession and a cheater in the resolution scene, I would appreciate knowing about it before the resolution scene. I'll pass it along, I said. And tell him. A pause. The specific pause of a man who is going to say something he would not say if he had thought about it for another 10 seconds. Tell him it was good work. He hung up before I could respond, which was deliberate, because Kramer does not say things like that, and when he does he prefers not to have to hear the response to them. I went to the office doorway. Kramer, I said. Reduced charge, and he said it was good work. Wolfe looked up from his book. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, a reduced charge is not an acquittal. No, I said. It is better than what she faced a week ago. Considerably, I said. He nodded once and went back to his book. Outside the window, West 35th Street went about its business. The November night was cold and clear, and the lamppost threw its circle on the pavement, and the brownstone sat in its block with the specific settled authority of a place that knows what it is, and has no interest in being anything else. Fritz appeared in the doorway. Dinner in 20 minutes, he said. The veal. Good, Wolfe said, without looking up. I went back to my desk and looked at the closed case file, and the closed notebook, and the window and the street. 8 days, $70 and a certainty. 3 words in a different case, $500 in another, and now this. A schoolteacher who knew her brother and would not accept what she knew to be false. 3 cases now in the Warm Pages series, and the theme was beginning to be visible. Not just the animals, not just the brownstone, but something underneath the cases. The thing that makes people come to a brownstone on West 35th Street with whatever they have and whatever they know. The thing that makes Nero Wolfe take the cases that deserve to be taken. The truth matters, not because it is comfortable or convenient or because it produces perfect outcomes, because it is the only foundation on which anything real can be built, and because a man who is accurate about the truth, consistently and without compromise, in a world that prefers its truths managed and its silences purchased, that man is worth the fee. Whatever the fee is. Juno came from the hall and lay down beside my desk, which she does sometimes in the evening when she has decided the day is done and the position she wants is here. I looked down at her and she looked up at me with the reading attention that is always there, always assessing, always noting. Good week, I said. She rested her chin on the floor and closed her eyes, which I took as agreement. Fritz called dinner. We ate.